This week's episode is sponsored by HelloFresh. This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. When I launched Renegade University 6 months ago, one of the first questions that people asked me was, can I get college credit for these courses? And I said, I don't know, let me look into it, that would be great. And so I looked into the regional accreditation agencies, which are the agencies that give accreditation to the higher education institutions that are generally respected by employers and other colleges and universities. It's really the currency in that field, in that industry. If you're not accredited by one of the 6 regional accreditation agencies, you're not taken seriously, and the name of the institution on your resume really means nothing. There's also what's called a national accreditation agency that accredits the universities like the University of Phoenix and DeVry, the so-called diploma mills that are the for-profit universities, which are universally seen as not being respectable among the elites in higher education. So when you have a name like one of those universities on your resume, it's meaningless. I could get accreditation for Renegade University from the National Accreditation Agency, but obviously that's worthless. There's no reason to give credit in that case. So I looked into how one can get accredited by one of the regional accreditation agencies, and I got only about 2 or 3 sentences into their standards before I realized that it was impossible. They require a certain number of volumes in your library. They require that you have a library. They require that the students be residential, that a certain percentage of your students live on campus. They require that a certain number of your faculty have PhDs from certain institutions. There's no way to do it unless you are a billionaire. And even then it would be difficult. So then I wondered, and I'm sort of ashamed still that I didn't know about this until I launched Renegade University. I wondered, what is this system and what is its history and what purpose does it serve? And I found something that's astonishing and really a scandal that needs to be known, because what I want to do now is begin a movement to change all of this. Now, of course, that's self-serving to some extent, because if the accreditation system in this country is eliminated or radically reformed, I'd prefer that it be eliminated. But either way, Renegade University will benefit, and I will benefit from that. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But it is also simply the thing, it is the system that has destroyed this thing that I really wanted to be a part of, that I think could be wonderful, that I assumed would be wonderful when I became a college student. When I was a college student, my very first semester, I thought we'd be sitting in classrooms debating the big ideas. I thought we would have the smartest professors with various different points of view going at it head to head. A real conflict of ideas, a real marketplace of ideas, real open inquiry. And of course, I found immediately that that doesn't exist really in higher education today, in colleges and universities. Virtually everyone agrees on the major issues. We know this from many different surveys. More than 90% of professors in the humanities and social sciences are Democrats or socialists or some form of leftist. We just simply know from experience, from having been students and faculty in those places, that many ideas are simply not spoken. They're not allowed. You will either be punished directly for stating certain ideas, or you censor yourself, which is usually what happens. There's a very narrow Overton window in colleges and universities, as a lot of us know. there are many things that are simply not said. And I don't mean things like actual racism and actual sexism. I mean certain ideas that are outside the left liberal norms. Well, that idea that professors and universities should have a narrow range of ideas in them began in the Middle Ages with the creation of the very first universities. The medieval universities, which were established in various cities across Europe in the Middle Ages, were all sanctioned by the church. They were directly sanctioned, licensed by the Pope, in fact. You could not become a professor, they were called masters then, you could not become a master at a university, a faculty member, without the direct blessing of the Pope. And the idea was that there were certain people who simply had direct access to God's truth. What the Pope and the church did was they identified certain people that they believed had direct access to God's truth, meaning that they served the church's purposes, and they did not allow anyone else into those early universities to teach or to study. Now, that was the model that Harvard used when it was established, the model of the medieval university. It was the model that was used by Columbia University and Yale and Dartmouth and all the rest since then. The modern American and British university is modeled after the medieval university. What that meant was that there were various structures established in those universities which remain today with some recent additions. So one was something we call faculty governance, which means that the faculty have basically autonomous control over the curriculum. Now, the president of the university, and sometimes the provost, can veto curricular decisions, but the faculty makes all of the day-to-day decisions as to what is taught, what's on syllabi, and more importantly, who teaches the curriculum. Hiring, firing, promotion, and tenure are all a part of faculty governance. Again, the president of a university can veto a faculty's decision, but the faculty controls the entire process until that very last point, which means that in the vast majority of cases, the faculty really decides, because of course they have direct access to God's truth. The other thing that was established in the medieval universities that of course is replicated today is tenure, a lifetime appointment. You can never be fired from your position as a faculty member once you've passed a series of tests, unless you do something just absolutely heinous and beyond the pale, like commit an act of physical violence or plagiarize your work or assault one of your students. So nearly all colleges and universities today in the United States still have a tenure system. That, too, again, was from the medieval model, which is all quite ironic. The most conservative institutions, arguably, in the history of the world is what today's liberals and progressives at these colleges and universities are defending. Now, that model, the form of the modern university, was perfected, essentially, and changed in a significant way, but I would say not in a fundamental way. During the progressive era, between the 1880s and 1910s, what happened was the progressives at the time took control of the modern universities, and they replaced God with the state. They replaced God also with professional organizations. So that was when the American Historical Association was founded. That was when the American Psychiatric Association was founded. That was when the American Sociological Association, the American Anthropological Association, the Modern Languages Association, and all the associations governing the sciences as well. You would not be allowed to teach any of those subjects unless you were essentially sanctioned or licensed by one of those associations, which of course meant that you wrote and taught and spoke only the particular ideas that were considered to be reasonable and respectable by the already established elites in those fields. Again, a fundamentally conservative idea and practice that today is being defended tooth and nail by the liberals and progressives who teach our students, our children, in the schools today. What faculty governance did was it created a new monopoly. The monopoly in the medieval universities was protected by the church. The new monopoly among faculty, the new monopoly among colleges and universities in modern America was and is protected by the state. In 1965, in Lyndon B. Johnson's Higher Education Act, there were two things in that act that very few people talk about. One, that was when the program of federally backed loans was established. The idea was, of course, that Until 1965, elite universities and colleges were really the domain of the elites, the wealthy. So the argument that was made by liberal Democrats in 1965 was, we can't pay for all of these working class kids to go to colleges, but we can give them these loans at least, and we will guarantee them if they default, the federal government will make the bank whole. But because the federal government would be so on the hook for those loans, they included in the act a provision that states that a debtor, a student who takes a federally backed student loan, can never have that loan forgiven. If one declares bankruptcy successfully, that is one of the few things that is not forgiven in a bankruptcy. That is the law still today. Also in that act, this is the Higher Education Act of 1965, celebrated as one of the great achievements of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, was a provision stating that the accreditation agencies, which had existed since the progressive era, progressives at the turn of the 20th century, were very concerned that all of these very intelligent, very educated immigrants, in particular Jews, who were flooding in to places like New York City and Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Boston, would compete with their universities where the WASPs held control. And they would bring with them into their own colleges radical ideas like socialism and anarchism, because, of course, Jews were disproportionately involved in radical movements at that time. So the accreditation agencies, the 6 regional accreditation agencies that the WASP elites established then, were explicitly, deliberately designed to keep radical immigrants out of the universities, to establish a monopoly, to protect the WASP elite. Again, yet another tremendous irony. This is the model. This is the institution that today's liberals and progressives at colleges and universities are defending with their lives, really. The 1965 Higher Education Act says that only schools that are accredited by one of those agencies can receive federal funding of any kind, including federal student loans, and that the accreditation agencies must periodically be accredited themselves, licensed, in other words, by the Secretary of Education, the head of the Department of Education in the federal government. So a school cannot receive federal funding, its students cannot receive federal loans or any federal funding unless the school is accredited by an agency, which in turn is accredited by the federal government. It is a federal monopoly, a state-sanctioned, state-protected, state-defended monopoly. Virtually no one knows this. I myself, of all people, didn't know this until people asked me how I could give credit, college credit for Renegade University courses. Even me, of all people. Basically, no one knows this. What have been the effects of this monopoly? Of course, its stated intention, since the Pope first granted sanctions to the medieval universities, has been to preserve the university as a place where the most intelligent, most learned, and most responsible members of society teach our children, train them for future careers that will serve society. That was the stated intention by the church in the 1100s and 1200s. It is the stated intention by the federal government and the mission statements at most universities in the United States today. But what has actually been the effect of this monopoly, this national, state-protected monopoly? It has meant that when a faculty member gains tenure, he or she has control over who will be hired and who will be fired and who will gain tenure as well. So naturally, people tend to hire and promote those who have ideas similar to their own. It is very, very, very rare to find someone who chooses to work with someone who disagrees with them on fundamental issues. This explains why more than 90% of humanities and social sciences professors agree on the big issues. Why there is no intellectual diversity in universities today, why there is a suffocating conformity on those campuses, even though I know from personal experience, having taught at them for more than 20 years, that many students don't agree with or abide by the dominant ideas there. They simply keep quiet, as do some faculty as well, like me. For years and years, I simply kept quiet when I had heterodox ideas that weren't approved, officially sanctioned by that monopoly. So it's a monopoly of tenure protected by a state monopoly. That's one effect. The other effect, and I think this is what we're seeing now, is that those who operate within a monopoly, those who do not have to compete in a marketplace, which our colleges and universities and our tenured professors don't ever have to do, what does that tend to mean in terms of the quality of work, the quality of the products that they put out? Generally speaking, I think economists agree on this. It means that their products suffer, decline in quality. And the longer a monopoly has power, the lower the quality of its products are. And I think that is in part what we are seeing today. When you see a liberal or a leftist professor, on the rare occasion when they venture into public to debate someone with fundamentally different ideas, like on a cable news show or at some public forum, and this is just subjective, but you can tell me if you agree, they lose. In fact, it's often embarrassing, and I am, in fact, often embarrassed for them. But it also, I think, this monopoly, this long-term monopoly, explains why the discourse coming out of campuses, whether you agree with it or not, is of such poor quality. There aren't arguments being made anymore. There were arguments when I was in college in the 1980s and when I first started teaching in the 1990s. People did make arguments even when I disagreed with them. There was a value in argumentation, and now it is simply moralistic. John McWhorter has famously said that the racial discourse, the anti-racism ideology that is dominant on campuses today is religious thinking. There is no logic. There is no evidence brought to bear. Evidence is irrelevant. If someone or something is labeled as a racist, that is the end of the discussion. And there is, of course, no attempt to discern exactly what racism means, a term that has had many, many, many definitions over about a 200-year period. So we have a very poor quality of discourse, very poor products coming out of these places. And again, I think this is all explained by this monopoly. But now, for the first time in American history, for the first time in world history, we actually have an opportunity to overthrow it. We have a small window of opportunity to eliminate that monopoly and force those schools and force those professors to compete on an open market with institutions like Renegade University and institutions that will spring up immediately all over the place once we do this. Why? Because the current Secretary of Education is Betsy DeVos, and she is the first Secretary of Education who has said anything sympathetic at all to what I have just been saying to you. She is critical of the accreditation system. She hasn't called for its abolition, but she has made noises about reforming it. I know that she has also taken meetings with the small handful of think tank experts who are on my side in this, who are on our side, I would say, in this. So what I want to do now is begin a campaign, an actual old school political activist campaign. I want to lobby with the people, Betsy DeVos, to abolish the system of accreditation that has destroyed higher education in this country and that makes it nearly impossible for those of us who are at least as good as those professors who teach there to compete, to have the same value in the products that we give. I can't give the college credit that they can. I can't have Renegade University mean anything on a resume because of it. It's a stupendous open scandal, and it has to be done away with. If we value education, if we value intellectual life, if we value a diversity of ideas, if we want our children to not be moralistic idiots. So I don't know how exactly we're going to do this. I have many ideas. What I want, though, is for listeners of this show to suggest them to me. If you're interested in joining this campaign to overturn higher education as we know it, to bring about a real revolution that will serve Renegade University, but it's going to serve many, many other much bigger purposes, let me know. Get in contact with me. Tell me what you want to do. Tell me what we should do. Betsy DeVos could be fired today. She could be gone in 3 years. Her boss could be fired today. And it'd be surprising to many of us if he lasts another 3 years. So the window of opportunity is small and closing fast. Let's do it. Now, what I just experienced for the second time this past weekend in Los Angeles was evidence of what a world without that monopoly would look like. I had a room full of people from all over the country and the world. They came from Australia. They came from Hawaii. They came from all over California and Washington State and New Hampshire and Ohio and Illinois and Texas and Kansas. They came from all over the country and the world to do one thing, not get college credit. They came there simply to talk about big ideas. And what we did for 3 days was talk about philosophy. We talked about American history. We talked about current events and politics. We talked about ourselves. We talked about our personal histories, our feelings, our desires, our fears, our loves and our hates, and how those things relate to our ideas about things like history and philosophy and politics. A lot of the people, as you will hear in this podcast, which was recorded at the end of the weekend, also told me this. They came to argue with the professor, with me. They flew from places like Hawaii and Colorado because they disagreed with me. They wanted to take me on, not in a mean or vicious way, but because they had different ideas and they wanted to have it out in a public sphere with me. They had heard me state things in public, and they didn't have a chance to speak back when I was on some podcast. Now they did. That's how important ideas were to these people. That's how important a competition of ideas is to these people who came to Renegade University's weekend event in Los Angeles. It was phenomenal. I said to them at the end of the weekend, and this is still true, it was the greatest thing that's ever happened in my career. I've published 2 books. I've written a dissertation. I have a PhD from Columbia. I got a fellowship at Columbia. All those were tremendous milestones in my career. Nothing compares to having people fly from all over the world to simply talk about ideas with me. It's something I dreamed of. It's something I assumed would happen when I was a freshman at Antioch College in the fall of 1984. I thought that's what college would be. But it has not been that way for all those years, for me and for most other people. But in that room, this last weekend, there was a glimpse of, I think, a different future. We can actually do this now. Oh, and by the way, I left out one thing. That monopoly in higher education has produced prices that are famously astronomical. Everyone knows about this. People don't know that again was produced by this monopoly. Those federally backed student loans, that creates what economists call an artificial demand. Many more people can go to college who couldn't otherwise. The problem is, first of all, that we have this cultural norm in this society that you are not an elite, a respectable person. You cannot achieve the highest degrees of success unless you go to a college for 4 years and graduate with a diploma. First of all, that's a lie, I think. Many people shouldn't go to college, not because they're dumb, but because they actually have better things to do according to their own values. But it's also meant that 70% of college students today take out federal student loans. And of those, the average indebtedness after 4 years is $30,000. So they begin their life as adults with a $30,000 debt because of this monopoly. There's artificial demand, and the producers, these schools, are a monopoly that can charge virtually anything they want, because you can be poor and still go to Harvard if you take out all those loans. So that's why college administrators make 6-figure salaries, and that's why college administrators have been multiplying like rabbits. That's why these colleges and universities look often like wealthy people's resorts, with yoga classes and fancy gyms and cafeterias that rival some of the best restaurants in New York and Los Angeles. But the whole thing is clearly a house of cards. The quality of the discourse, the quality of the teaching by these professors who don't have to compete for a job, who have a lifetime appointment, is terrible. I don't think you have to take my word for it, because I'm sure that most of you have been in a college classroom. The vast majority of them don't know how to teach. They can't teach. They don't care about it very much. Why? Because they don't have to. So I did charge a fee to attend the Renegade University weekend. I charge fees for all Renegade University courses. But I can tell you one thing, it is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of $30,000. It's a tiny, tiny fraction of the cost of a single course at any college in this country. So we had people from all over the world coming to talk about ideas, to debate about ideas for a fraction of the cost of attending one of these respectable institutions. And as I said, it was the finest moment, the best moment, maybe my proudest moment in my whole career. Here's the podcast with several of the participants in the Renegade University weekend this past weekend, which I co-hosted with Brett Venat of the School Sucks Project. Enjoy and join me.
Welcome to Renegade University and School Sucks Project present a weekend with Thaddeus Russell, the live interactive podcast. Thanks for coming, everybody. Now, Thad, you record your podcast in this very room that we're in right now.
I do.
All right. And do you usually sit like uncomfortably close to the person on the same side of the table?
I do. I like to smell my interviewees.
Nice. So we are on one side of the table, and there's an empty chair on the other side of the table, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be, just like we did in Salem, we're going to be bringing up people who have submitted questions for you or for me or for both of us, and we're going to be talking to them. So I thought we'd just start with Patrick. Welcome, Patrick. So just keep it nice and close to your face, and,
okay.
and just kind of tilt it up also, like towards your face, like this. Even though, yes. Okay. If it feels awkward, you know you're doing it right.
Perfect.
All right.
Most things I do feel awkward, so I guess I'm doing everything right.
Okay, so let's get to your question.
Okay, so one of the things I have personally, and this is a question, I'm not just going to be talking at you. One of the things I struggle with personally is, I mean, there are some things I have convictions about, and there's a lot of things as I get older where I'm just like, I don't know. And whether it's through lack of sufficient information or just exhaustion, because like, you know, I used to be a hardcore libertarian. I still have a lot of libertarian leanings. I tend to approach, at least start many issues from that point of view, but a lot of the times I just go like, shit, yeah, that's tough. And so I was wondering what's been clanking around your head lately, that on which the jury's still out, where you're going like, yeesh. And this can be something that's a current event. This can be something personal. This can be something philosophical, where you're just like, this is a hard case, and still need sorting out to do.
School. So, and this is what I talked about with Brett here when he was on my podcast. Whether to actively encourage my son to leave school. He's a junior in high school right now in a public school. And, you know, Brett helped me think through it in ways that I'd never thought about before. But it's still, it's hard to see a way to make it work, actually. And I feel almost like a failure in a way. And well, in a couple ways. I feel like a failure that I'm sort of failing myself. I'm not being true to my own ideas and beliefs and values. And I also might be failing him, my son. So I don't know what to do there.
That sounds agonizing, by the way.
I wish I could see an easy path. Yeah, so as I said to Brett at the time, you know, if there were a network of people all around me who were doing this, that I could tap into, I would definitely do it. Or at least I would push hard to do it. But I'm not aware of that, and I don't see it. So although I want to say there's two people here, a mother and a daughter, who kind of made it sound easier to me, which is that, according to them, that it is the mother. Well, I don't want to speak for her, but I'm just going to report what she said to me, and she can correct me later. But that it sounds like it's a process of her suggesting to her daughter things to read, activities to do and pointing her to particular resources, and the daughter taking those up on her own and following through on them through the day. Generally speaking, is that fair? They're nodding kind of. She said close. Okay. So that sounded to me like work I could do. But again, it's still a struggle. I don't know, partly because my son thinks he needs to go to school to meet people.
This is something that's come up on the trip a bunch of times. Like the first day of School Sucks Across America, somebody asked me if you had to divide school into thirds and put a child or a teenager into school for one of those periods, which one would it be? And it would obviously be high school, because that's the time they need to have the social interaction, right? Now, there's obviously negatives about that, but you ever been on a podcast and then as soon as like you're not on it anymore, you think of all the things you wanted to say?
I've never been on a... People keep asking if I'm on a podcast. Do I have a voice that sounds like a podcaster?
You might have that experience in 10 minutes, but I had it when I was on his show, because I remember like really struggling with that question. And if you're a teenager interested in school survival, like Thaddeus Russell is probably a good father to have, because you're already existing in that environment where you're talking with your son, and the way you are is kind of rubbing off on him through your conversations, or even just naturally. A lot of parents just completely outsource the responsibility of school as education to these strangers and bureaucrats. And once you're wise to that, as you've probably been for since you were 6, then divorce is always the wild card. Right? Because when you have a co-parent that you're not on the same page with about everything, like so many people have told me that story as I've traveled across the country. But if you have, an active intellect and a distrust of this system as a parent, I've said this 3 times already along this trip, and unfortunately you have the situation where you have teenagers in public school. Those teenagers are much better prepared to survive that process simply because of who their parents are and what their parents do and how their parents think. Right? Because most people are just telling their kids that that's their education. You keep pushing yourself through this tube, and happiness and success are on the other side. And I will also be a kind of policeman that pushes you through this tube if you slow down or, you question the direction of this tube.
What's a question that's rattling around in your head, Patrick?
Oh, shit. Well, I mean, this is more of a policy. This is less I guess on a more micro level. I'm starting to come around. I've basically become bored into supporting single payer healthcare. I'm just sick of the I'm not discounting the possibility of a purely market based Pareto optimal healthcare situation. I don't think we're going to be there anytime soon. This is by no means an endorsement of every single aspect of single payer healthcare. I don't think it's a Bernie Sanders panacea, but as far as nationalizing, huge sectors of life, I'd much rather have nationalized healthcare as opposed to, say, nationalized education, because I feel like the state has more of a vested interest in keeping people healthy than they do in making free thinkers.
True.
And
read Foucault to find out.
And
biopower.
Yeah, and that's the one Foucault term from Berkeley I remember. I remember you were shocked because I said I had not read any Foucault despite having gone to Berkeley. I don't know how I pulled that off. But yeah, and it seems like state and individual interests kind of align to some degree in being healthy. So
no, the only problem, I would say, it not so much if I get what you're saying, but if freedom is one of those interests, because if the state has that for the individual, if freedom is an interest, there's going to be a conflict.
Oh,
because
yeah.
If the state has a vested interest in keeping you healthy, it will be very, 1930s Germany calisthenics type stuff. I could picture
lots of push-ups.
Yeah, well, but lots of. But I mean, I'm not picturing like the telescreen in 1984, calling off. But that's hyperbole. But to some extent, there will obviously be more regulation about your behavior and your diet and all of that in that system.
Oh, there will be,
Yeah.
and that will, and again, that will suck. But also, like this is the most tepid defense of single payer healthcare you're probably gonna hear. Like I am, it's really kind of, and it's kind of throwing up my arms and being like, yeah, maybe, but now I don't know, and has my intellectual curiosity reached its limit? Because I'm sure there are people who support single payer healthcare who would just talk forever about. And I also kind of feel guilty about not caring anymore.
Yeah. So I lived in London for a year when I was in college, and I got off the plane with bronchitis in London. And I was told to go.
Did you have bronchitis when you got on the plane?
I think I got it when I was on the plane.
How long was that flight?
Whatever it is, I don't know. Many hours, enough time to get bronchitis. Apparently.
Okay.
So I got off the plane sick, very sick, and I was told to go to the doctor. And I said, well, I don't have any insurance here. And they said, doesn't matter, go to the NHS office. And I actually didn't even go to the office. I just went directly to a doctor. And I walked in, and I was an American. I wasn't even part of that country. And he treated me and gave me antibiotics and cured the bronchitis. And I thought, wow, this confirms my socialist beliefs. So if my choice is between that system, the NHS, and the American system of the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, I will take the NHS in a heartbeat. Now, quickly. The American system, as I see it, is basically a Frankenstein monster of the worst aspects of capitalism and statism, which is that it is privately owned. It is corporatism, to the nth degree. It is privately owned, private ownership. So there's a profit motive, but regulated in such a way that there is no competition, right? And so it's the worst possible thing. But
and
anyway,
also tilted by the fact that all of the people with the most urgent healthcare needs do have a single payer system: veterans, senior citizens, and lower income people.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to do.
Well, I mean, and basically my enthusiasm is far too strong a word, but my acquiescence towards single payer healthcare, surrender, actually, perfect.
Yeah,
my surrender to single payer healthcare, I just want to qualify, is in comparison to the current state of affairs, or the other state of affairs that we're likely to get. Yeah. Because we're not going to.
That's my position too.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, we're not. Even before Obamacare, I believe it was 40 cents of every dollar spent on healthcare was going through the state in some way, shape, or form. So it's not like we were starting.
Well, okay, so
right.
I think the answer is the answer that any radical political movement has to this, which is live within the system. Make it as good as possible in the moment, but always critique it. That's the thing. So cultural work, intellectual work, think like what we're doing right now, speaking publicly about what might be even better, never stop, even if you surrender for the moment to something that is not good enough.
Excellent.
Yeah. Awesome.
Anything else?
No, this has been real. This has been a great weekend. I'm sure other people are going to go over that. And it's weird just seeing you with the microphone actually makes your voice sound more like the podcast voice. Is a weird, like the heuristic. It's like, oh, I'm not actually.
It's the NPR effect.
It is the NPR effect. Yeah.
You should hear it through these headphones. It sounds beautiful. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, right to the recorder. Yeah. Thank you guys. Thanks, Brent. Thanks.
Absolutely.
For that.
So where did you come from, and why did you decide to attend?
So I came from Hollywood. So luckily on weekend mornings, it's like a 25-minute drive. Mm-hmm. And I came because I shot some promo pics for Thad last month. And the reason I shot some promo pics for Thad is because I discovered his podcast, which is the best goddamn podcast. It really because it's so hard. So many podcasts try to pass them. Okay, there's two extremes of podcasts. One is like the three guys having conversations and just riffing on each other and and inside jokes that you don't really have an awareness of unless you've heard the entire podcast. And the other one is just a Q&A interview. And this, I don't know, your conversations hit that middle ground where it's accessible, but yeah, it's a conversation. You're speaking to people and listening to people. You're not Q&Aing if something about yourself comes up. But anyway, yeah, how did I get here? I don't know. I just like interesting. I like people who make me say shit where or make me think, where I make me go, huh. I like people who make me not have an
who make me think.
Who make me think. Yeah, not trying to be a troublemaker. But no, I like people, and you and your guests elicit the reaction from me. I like people in my own life who do this, who say things to which I don't have an immediate response.
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
and even things that make even things where I might feel defensive, but I can't. But I'll just be like, I think that's when your brain develops.
Exactly. That's really well said.
Greatest compliment I could ever get.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
You're also very handsome.
Oh, well.
Second greatest compliment.
I mean, that's obvious. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Let's bring up Brian. Brian, also local. And why don't you just very quickly tell us, Brian, how you came to be here today?
How far back do we want to go?
Like Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon, I came from the other side of the 405, and I met up with you guys.
So how did you first hear about whatever it was that brought you here?
I first heard about Thad via the Rogan podcast sometime late last year. Sort of the gateway drug thing for a lot of people. And that was actually his third Rogan appearance, which a lot of people rip on him for, where he went on his gender rant. Mm-hmm. And that was actually really fascinating to me.
You mean discourse, not rant?
Yes, the discourse. Yes, the very intelligent discussion on it. And yeah, that I heard somebody who was describing something that I had never heard articulated that way before, and I was like, "Hey, this guy is kind of onto something here. I want to see what else he has to say." And I went into the podcast, and it was like, it opened up everything for me, I think. So that was great.
What do you mean opened everything for you?
I think the reason I actually started listening to Rogan was sort of after the election. I kind of looked at the world, and living in LA, it's obviously very, very liberal. But everything was just so polarized. And I was like, in the last year, things have just gotten really, really polarized and really, really bad. Like, there's got to be someone who can help us navigate this space, or at least not necessarily someone, but there has to be ideas that are not just these super polarized ideas that can help us navigate this. And so I started listening around, just listening to other people and talking with more people, having more and more discussions with different people. And and then I found you, and I was like, yeah, this guy is kind of navigating this space. He's coming at it from an angle where it's making sense, and you're going back to sort of the roots of things. I like that a lot.
You also told me just about an hour ago that you liked my argument about gender being a social construct, unlike about 7.5 million other people. And you also said that you had a friend or a college roommate who's still your friend who is a finalist or was a finalist on RuPaul's Drag Race.
This is correct.
Yeah, I don't think those things are coincidental. So I was sort of curious about that. Straight white dudes generally aren't even aware of drag queens, much less, connect them to politics in that way. So I'm just curious sort of how you've thought about that and what that means to you.
Well, I think what I do in my life and sort of my work is I've traveled a lot since a young age, and I've been to like 28, 29 countries in the past, I don't know how long. And I'm always just struck by how many radical individuals there are across the world. I've always sort of known that people never fit perfectly into these boxes. It's just like these incredible, beautiful people. It's like this giant blossoming tree of individuals and so many different ideas and so much overlap. And no one ever fit perfectly into the boxes that they're supposed to fit into me. And I went to a great liberal arts college and met people from all over the world who had all sorts of ideas and were into all sorts of arts, including things like drag. And I was like, this is wonderful. This is what the world is supposed to be like. It's supposed to be these people with free expression and free ideas. And so, Yeah, and in my work, for those of you that know, I'm a photographer and a cinematographer and a journalist, and what I try to do is, maybe my voice isn't some radical, individualist voice, but I want to sort of give space to and celebrate these unique people, and that's what I try to do in my work.
Wow, I love that completely. I don't know what else to say. So, I can say this: the drag queen thing is almost never brought up to me by anybody. And so when you said that to me about an hour ago, that not only was your roommate a drag queen and a famous drag queen, but that you understood the connections between what I was saying about gender and drag queens, and how now you're saying to you, all of that represents liberation.
Yes.
Right? Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you just don't hear that very often. No, I never hear that, actually. And I certainly don't hear it from people who look and, have your identity, right? So thank you.
Hey, thank you, Thad.
Yeah.
And it sounded like you actually were starting to answer the question that you wanted to ask Thad, like the utility, right?
Yes,
Go ahead with that.
It's a utility question. I've sort of worked it out for my personal life, but what I really want to know is, this is a great weekend. I love everything about this. It's great. I love coming here and talking about ideas with people and learning history. But what's the call to action? What do we do? What's the application of this? Like, if it's sort of if I leave here and I was like, wow, like Thad really showed me just how fucked up the world has been systematically for a really long time, and all that really sucks. I don't know what to do with that. More importantly, I don't know what to advise other people. If someone comes to me and we start talking about this, like, well, what do you think we should do? And my answer is, well, I don't know. I don't know what we can do.
What you should do is take pictures.
Yeah.
What you should do is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Take pictures of those people, right? Who you think are beautiful individuals. And then you don't even need to do that. But that's enough. But you could then pick up a microphone and speak into it about how those people are beautiful individuals and how that's important and represents liberation to you. Mm-hmm. And you just keep doing that. So in other words, Brian, you do what you're doing.
Well,
there's this question though about, like, you tell people you came here, you say, I just went to this weekend, it was great, you should go. And they say, why?
Yes, right? Exactly.
That's the, like, what's the utility for everybody? Like, most of us, I think, have, through what we've been through, have figured out how we're trying to turn this around for ourselves and make what we're learning useful. But there's a lot of people that we would like to expose to somebody like you or shows like yours. And it would be hard to tell them what the practical value of that is. Or to Renegade, even to the book. I've given the book to people. I've given people the audio book, which is awesome. I've bought the ebook for people. And I say, oh, you'll love it. It's really interesting. But what will you do with it? What would you want someone to do with your work, ideally? Is that a fair?
That's a perfect summary of what I'm asking.
Right. Do something like legalize sex work. Right. So I have an entire chapter devoted to sex work and prostitutes in the 19th century. And I am not taking credit for this, but in the last 5 years, basically coincidentally, a movement of sex workers has emerged. It's never happened before, that are getting national media exposure and actual talk about changing legislation. And I do think that's going to happen in our lifetime. Sex work will be legalized. Well, my book at least has provided an intellectual justification for legalizing sex work. So, that's just one example of its utility, but it can also be used for legalization of drugs, that movement, which is still going on, which is mostly one, but we still have a lot to do there. And so that book provides that justification, that intellectual framework for that.
What about larger aspects like foreign policy?
Well, yeah.
Like your new book, that to me is sort of the, like, look how deep this web goes. Like, look how long from the Declaration of Independence we've sort of set ourselves up to be this way.
Yeah.
How do I go out and live a life that starts unraveling that makes the world better for more people?
Well, okay.
How do we save the world, Thad?
As I said to you guys when I was talking about foreign policy, every single military conflict, every single war in American history was begun in where? The minds of academics, intellectuals, professors. They all began as ideas, right? They weren't imposed by some machine outside of us. These came from inside of our heads, or people's heads. So the only way to stop the wars, it seems to me logically, is to have different ideas emanate from different heads. I just don't know what else to say, except that everything to me is a cultural question. So law, to me, is always downstream from culture. You change the culture, you change the law. You change the culture, you change foreign policy. You change the culture, you change the world. And so it's just simply doing what we're doing. There's nothing to worry about or apologize for in terms of your own participation or contribution to historical change, because you are doing it. I know it feels small probably to you, or maybe even insignificant, but it is not. It is not. You always want to broadcast what you're doing as much as you can, but that is what you're doing. You take pictures, you have a website, anyone can see it. This is happening. You're part of it. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's heroic. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, it still feels small. Maybe I think I'm like, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and want to do as much as possible. And it's honestly, it's more so, like I said, I've kind of figured out how to live my life in such a way that I'm feeling I'm doing something, but I don't know how do we market this? We as a group here market this to other people. How do we get other people on board with what we're doing?
It's just, it's talking. It's telling them.
It's being a positive role model of like, I mean, this was always the thing with like the libertarian circles is people would learn all this stuff and then they'd go downtown in some libertarian stronghold in New Hampshire with dirty jeans on and scream at people through, and stand in front of cop cars.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, if all we do is sit here and, discuss.
Stop talking, Brian. Okay. I have a better answer, finally. Okay. I've talked about self-interest, a politics of self-interest versus a politics of morality all weekend, right? And this is my mantra. So what we need to do is identify our own self-interest and then fashion our politics around that. Then we ask others what their self-interest is. And when we find that they coincide with our interests, then we can establish political coalitions and get things done in the material world around that, right? Rather than going to people and saying, you should go to this meeting, you should support this legislation, you should behave and think differently because it's the moral and good thing to do.
And political activism is implicit you should.
Correct. Right. So again, so this is an anti-political activist argument I'm making, actually, right? Because those are always moralistic. They don't have to be, but they pretty much always are. So again, just ask people what their self-interest is. If their stated interest is to throw as many prostitutes in prison and volunteer for the United States Army, then go to the next person. No, really, right? Don't waste your time. Yeah. And don't tell them that they're wrong or bad or evil. This is really important, right? You know how I feel about those things, but I don't tell those people they're wrong because actually they're not wrong. They simply have different values than I do. This is the problem. This is one of the causes of the Trump phenomenon, right? Is that when we've come across people like that, we tend to yell at them and moralize against them. And then they just retreat into their own corner and moralize back at us in ways that are even worse than what they were saying previously. So identify self-interest, look for coalitional partners, and go there.
Great. I like that.
Good.
And do it publicly. I think too, as you talk about living your self-interest, which a lot of us try to do, what makes me happy, what makes me successful, what gives me freedom, tell other people about it, know, and that's what we try to do through these microphones or through some other format. And that attracts people to you, I think. So thank you very much for coming. Thanks for the great question. We were talking, thanks, Brian. So Brian was just up here and we were talking about change. Would you like to take that in a more extreme direction?
Yes, I would.
Okay, let's bring up Jared.
Of course I want extreme change. I'm an extremist.
This is Jared, everyone. Hello.
Hi, I am an extremist.
Perfect. You wanted to talk about political violence.
I did.
Go for it.
So Renegade History is fantastic. And it reminded me of a work that's called To Shake Their Guns in the Tyrant's Face. about what the professor, I believe his name is Robert Churchill, describes as libertarian political violence as the memory of the U.S. Revolutionary War. So he basically describes it as defending individual liberty broadly against state violence. And he shows that there's different rebellions throughout U.S. history and different pushbacks by individuals against the state. And it's not a way to glorify violence, but an explanation of radical change. And so when you talk about, like in the book, like the Stonewall riots, fighting back against police, we've had moments within libertarian movement where people are very nervous about talking about using violence against the state. Where do you cross that line? When do you cross that line? So Professor Churchill takes this argument and he brings it up to the militia movement in the 1990s. And this is something you talked about a little bit with my colleague Scott Horton about the Oklahoma City bombing and political violence and the use of state infiltration and blowback, and how these things are all wrapped up. So I was wondering, where do you think where is that line? What do you think? I mean, the civil rights movement, as you also describe, wouldn't have been what it was without armed resistance. Sorry, that's a lot.
Yeah, no. It's just a tough one, but I think I'm fairly clear about this. So the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, and as you said, I've written about this, and the civil rights leadership was aware that the threat of violence, anarchic violence, spontaneous violence in the streets by people not a part of the Christian nonviolent civil rights movement was always their leverage in negotiating with authorities at the municipal or federal level. Essentially, King blackmailed the mayor of Birmingham, Alabama, and the president of the United States. Essentially said, and if you read the letter from Birmingham jail, you can see it there, I believe, at least that's my interpretation of it. He says, if you don't deal with us in our nice, clean business suits and our Christian values, you're going to have to deal with those you-know-whats in the street who hate you, want to kill you, and burn down your businesses. So you better strike a deal with me to integrate, or else you're going to have to deal with those people in the streets and Malcolm X. So that's that answer. Now, okay, what do I then recommend to my family and friends to do to seek major social change? Riot in the streets? Fight the police? No, that's almost suicidal. But I don't know what to say about that. Nor do I know what to say about say the North Vietnamese in the 1960s. If this country were invaded by a foreign occupier and I were here with my son, my first thought is to leave the country. Just avoid it. I'm not going to defend any land. There is nothing to me that is worth defending in that way, right? So, but some people do think it's more important to die, an American or a Vietnamese than to live free elsewhere. So I don't know. Let me say this though, really quickly, because you made me think of something. Here's an argument I've made that doesn't go down well with most people. The only person I've ever given this to who immediately got it and liked it was Killer Mike, who interviewed me for a podcast that has still not been released, but which was supposed to be about Reconstruction, actually, and we talked about that, but it ended up being about a 2.5-hour discussion about mostly the history of Black violent resistance to state aggression and state violence. And, that the dominant narrative about Mike Brown and Ferguson is, well, there's two narratives, right? The first narrative is that he held his hands up and was shot by a racist cop. And then it became pretty clear, according to the evidence, I guess, that he didn't hold his hands up and actually attacked the cop. So since that evidence has come out, most of the Black Lives Matter movement and sympathizers to the BLM have continued to just pretend that there is no evidence that he fought back. And conservatives and right-wingers and opponents of the BLM have said, see, he was a thug and a criminal and a bad guy. Therefore, your whole movement is bankrupt and you're celebrating a villain, not a hero. So now it's pretty clear to me that Mike Brown wasn't the nicest guy in the world, and he jacked up that store owner immediately prior to being shot to death. Although I didn't see him kill anybody, he may have stolen, what was it, cigarillos or something, you know. Nonetheless, generally speaking, I think those neighborhoods are under a state of occupation. So what do you say to the Palestinians, who are very clearly under a state of occupation?
Bingo.
When they throw rocks at Israeli tanks? Now, would I recommend to my son that he throw rocks in an Israeli tank? No. But do I think that is a way that history changes? Yes, unfortunately. So I don't know what to say there. I don't want to be a hypocrite, and I want to be really clear. Mm-hmm. But Mike Brown should be celebrated to me by Black Lives Matter, by supporters of Black Lives Matter, and by libertarians, mm-hmm. because he was attacking an occupier.
Mm-hmm. So that's a problem that you and I had touched on a little bit earlier when we were talking about libertarianism somewhat being like an inverse of neoconservatism, with some of the disparate makeups of these groups. And one of the factions being, we have a large Jewish and Catholic contingent in the libertarian anarchist movement, and there's a very, very large portion of it that does not want to talk about Israel-Palestine. And that's a very, very big problem. And it's growing with the BDS movement as well, or the anti-BDS movement, really. That is larger than the boycott, divestment, and sanctions.
Do we have time?
Well, there's something...
A few minutes, because I'd love to respond to that.
I want to just interject this first. Like, when you say that Michael Brown... This is where a lot of people... There's a lot of quiet little explosions in people's heads out there, I think, or probably a few, when you say that Michael Brown is a hero for attacking an occupying force.
Yes.
Michael Brown had no intention of, I don't think, attacking an occupying force. He attacked an individual who was responding to a property crime. Now, I'm not on the side of that. Like, I don't know. When these kinds of things happen and I look at the two sides that break out, I say, wouldn't that be amazing if a complex event just played out exactly in the way that feeds whatever your narrative is? Yes. So the story is always more complicated than BLM makes it, or than the defenders of the Ferguson police make it. But I think that if Michael Brown had no intention of, doing what you're saying, he's trying to, make off with stolen property and avoid. What is heroic about that?
No one knows what was the consciousness of
That's true. That's true.
And as many of you know, I really try not to make claims about the consciousness of other people. So I have no idea what he was thinking or intending then. Mm-hmm. But so Palestinian kids have shoplifted too, and been pulled over by not just the Palestinian Authority police, but by Israeli soldiers for the shoplifting, for property crime, for all sorts of various crimes that aren't violent or semi-violent or totally violent. All right. Well, the thing is that they were born into an occupation. They've lived under an occupation. It's very clear to them that those tanks and the people in them represent the enemy to them. And boy, I think they have a case there.
No, I mean, there's no argument that I would make that it is an occupation. What's happening in Ferguson as a result of the drug war, as a result of the welfare state, like I'm not taking the side of,
Yeah. So I still don't see any difference. Now, is this an endorsement of theft? No. But the cops are the enemy in those places, I think, and they should be. If you're an anti-statist, if you're an individualist, if you are in favor of individual freedom, you've got to be on the side, actually, not encourage it, but be on the side, be in solidarity with the kid who throws the rock or throws the fist at the state, the agent of the state who actually has the guns, right? This seems to me to be just clear cut, and I don't even know why there's any.
I don't know. Do you have to pick a side? It doesn't seem like there's a protagonist.
Well, it's not. I mean, you don't have to make him. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there is a side, right? If you're an anti-statist, what Mike Brown did, not Mike Brown himself, but what he did was anti-statist.
Yes.
But why are we anti-state? Right? Like, so.
Well, maybe we're not.
No. But I'm saying. I'm saying.
Oh, what if we?
I guess everybody would have a different answer to that question. But if it's an opposition to aggression, then go ahead.
So Scott Horton, Sheldon Richmond, and our late colleague Will Grigg came from the right. He was a John Bircher.
Oh.
Now, Will Grigg has a very interesting background. His nickname was Blondie Con Carne. He was adopted. He thought he was Irish and Mexican. That turned out not to be true, but as he put it, he was a man of color. But he was with the John Birchers, and after a while, he couldn't be. It was after 9/11. It was because of the police issue. He said, protect your local cops. No, I'm sorry. I can't do that. And so he gravitated more to individualist anarchism and things over time, but, frequently wrote for Lew Rockwell and later worked with us. But he put it as the Tom Joad test. And he said, if you see a cop beating a man and you side with the cop, you're inherently authoritarian. But if you, without knowing anything else, but if you see a police officer beating a person and you see the victim, you see them as someone who's being oppressed by the state, you're inherently a libertarian. Mm-hmm. That was his test. He said the Tom Joad test. And maybe that's unfair, but I think that works in many ways.
Yeah. Well, I just had another thought. Sorry about Mike Brown. So the reason I have the idea, the analysis, whatever it is, argument that is an occupation, I didn't have that before the summer of 2014. I got that idea because of Mike Brown. That's when that happened. I started to look into it, and it occurred to me, it was pretty plain that it really looked a lot like Palestine, that was an occupation. And I stand by that. I was mocked. I was ridiculed at the time by some people for saying that about those particular neighborhoods. No, not all African Americans are under occupation. There are particular neighborhoods, particular towns in this country that I think it is fair to say are under occupation. Mike Brown didn't just cause me to rethink what's going on with the police in those cities, in those towns. It caused, as you know, the entire country and the entire world to rethink it. And since then, everybody's been talking about it. And the issue of police militarization became known. No one knew that before Mike Brown. The idea that police are using arrests and traffic stops to finance local governments wasn't known at all before Mike Brown. The Department of Justice didn't conduct any investigation, any research into what was going on until Mike Brown. And then we found out the intricacies in St. Louis, Ferguson, and Baltimore later because of that. Basically because of Mike Brown and people like Mike Brown. It caused a national conversation that now I don't like where that conversation is now, but certainly for a good year or two, it was extremely productive. And what I want to do is get back to actually the Mike Brown era, right? The post Mike Brown era that he largely created and caused by his action, rather than these endless, fruitless conversations about victims and oppressors. But as a matter of fact, he created, by doing that, one of the most useful national conversations I've ever witnessed.
But if the conversation becomes overpopulated by people who have little information or want to organize it into like the binary this or that, I mean, how productive is that ultimately?
I'm offering a different binary.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you're outside of it.
It's just a different binary, So Mike Brown is on my side and the cops are on their side. There you go. Now you can choose, or you can not play the binary game, but that's the binary I'm living under, and there you go.
Well, and it seems like in the same way, though, like we are living under empire. That's partially what we've really focused on this for today. So it's starting to wonder, that we all are kind of under an occupying force to different degrees,
sure.
Different experiences, but
unless you voted for that force,
sure,
right? And a lot of people have.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, so they're not living under occupation, or at least it's an occupation that they chose. Just some of us didn't vote for anything or choose any of this. So yes, I think we are. I think that's fair to say.
Awesome. Anything else?
No, thank you very much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you for coming, Jared.
Let's take a quick break to hear about our sponsor. HelloFresh delivers meal kits to your door that make cooking more fun so you can focus on the whole experience, not just the final plate. Customers can order 3, 4, or 5 different meals per week, designed for 2 or 4 people. New recipes are created by chefs each and every week with step-by-step instructions designed to take around 30 minutes for anyone, from novices to seasoned home cooks who are short on time. You can choose your delivery day for when it works best for your schedule. Consumer Reports gave HelloFresh an overall rating of excellent in its evaluations of meal delivery services for the taste, nutritional value, and ease of preparation of its meals. And now, HelloFresh costs less than $10 a meal. My girlfriend and I recently made 2 dinners from HelloFresh, including the Adobo Loco steak with a poblano corn and crispy potato hash that we made for one of my producers, Gabe. It took us only half an hour to prepare the meals, and we were all thoroughly impressed with how good the food was. For $30 off your first week of HelloFresh, visit HelloFresh.com and enter promo code UNREGISTERED30. That's promo code UNREGISTERED30.
I feel like this would be a good time to bring Nathan up if you feel ready.
Yeah.
This is Nathan, everyone. That's all right. Don't worry about it. That's fine. There's a rug there. It's my fault for putting things on the edge of the table if they're valuable. So what brought you here, Nathan?
I wanted to question Thad.
No, the question was what brought you to LA, not what brought you to this table.
Oh, because I wanted to question Thad.
Then we're already friends. Okay, good. Let's hear it.
Okay, so first of all, I have to apologize because for the longest time I did not respect your arguments to be as full as I've found out over the weekend.
All right,
that
so
they are.
I already love you even more.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I love to hear more than anything else.
Okay.
Yeah. And you don't even have to end up agreeing with me at all. What I love more than anything else is someone who hears me, doesn't like it, but just stays there for a little while to hear more. That's all. That is what I love more than anything else. I don't even care if they end up voting for Hillary Clinton or whatever. Just stay with me and listen some more. I love that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. So a little bit of background first. I want to touch a couple points, and then I'm going to ask you a question that I myself don't have an answer to. So I'm looking to get your opinion, and I lean one way, but I'm not 100% sold that way, and I'm thinking you're probably going to lean the other way, and that's why I want to ask you the question. So you talked earlier about people choosing different ways to live their life, and we need to respect that. And I know that personally as a teenager, I did a lot of, I leaned very left, and I didn't respect property rights very much, and I did not respect work ethic. I was very anti-capitalist, and I did a lot of things that were very destructive to other people's property. And I did a lot of things that actually almost landed myself in prison, landed a lot of my friends in prison, and almost landed me in a very bad life that I wouldn't be happy with. Then as I started getting older, I started a business. I started viewing things differently because now I was in somebody else's shoes. And I started realizing that to achieve my dreams, I couldn't just sit around and smoke pot and play video games all day. I started realizing that if I wanted to be valuable to the people that I wanted to serve, I couldn't just be self-serving all the time. And I started realizing that that was more rewarding for me in life, is to serve others, to go out and make the lives of other people better. And I wasn't able to do that by still living in the mindset that I was when I was 16 years old. So you said that works for me, but that maybe doesn't work for everybody else. Maybe not everybody else wants to be a valuable contributor to society. Maybe, and I get that. The rules that I live by, like right now, would be totally oppressive and tyrannical if I tried to impose them on 16-year-old me. And if the rules that I tried to live by at 16 years old, I tried to live by now, I'd feel just as oppressed. So in my own life, I can say what rules work for me now didn't work for me then, and what rules worked for me then would not work for me now. So I would not dream of saying the way I live my life is the way everybody should live their life, because I've got it all figured out. So I'm 100% with you on that. Now, the first time that I heard you on Brett's podcast, what really made me say, can I cuss? What really made me say fuck Thaddeus Russell was the thing with the motel or with the hotel.
Oh, this was a hotel.
Here it goes. It was a hotel, not just a motel. This was a high
Hotel,
crime.
motel, Holiday
Not a low
Inn.
crime.
Okay, so it was
Here we go. Okay.
the people that smoke pot, and I smoke pot, and I smoke pot openly. I'm not against smoking marijuana, but you said those people should be looked up to. Those people should be praised for breaking the rules of a property owner. And there was a bunch of reasons that you gave for it. And 16-year-old version of me, and even 25-year-old version of me agrees with you still on those things. But business owner version of me who says, I have to make sure the room smells nice for the next people that come in. Because if I get a bad reputation, there goes my business. And my customers with Yelp and all the reviewing things, if I promise my customers this room is going to smell nice for you, and the last guy smoked up a bunch of pot in it, now I'm not able to serve people anymore. So whether it's an Airbnb where it's just my house and I say, hey, when you're here, you can't smoke in this inside because the next people here, or if it's a hotel, or if it's whatever the case may be, that's really my thing is when it comes down to it, even inside, I'm conflicted. Property rights versus independent individual rights versus as a society, there are shared areas of property or there are personal areas of property. And like you said, what works for you doesn't work for me. What works for me doesn't work for you. But when it comes down to certain areas like property, inside this space, only one set of rules can work. And where I would say that I kind of lean is towards whoever owns the property at the time. And what you said was the opposite of that. And as a business owner, it's hard for me to agree with that. But as an individualist, it's very easy for me to agree with that. So if I can't even come to a form of agreement inside of myself, what does that mean for society as a whole? And how do we deal with those situations where we can't just live and let live because one purveying form of handling the situation has to supersede over the other in order for it to work?
Yeah. So if I owned that hotel, I would have kicked them out.
Okay.
The weed smokers out of my hotel immediately. Oh, and I would have blacklisted them too. I would have had a list of their names at the front desk, and I would never allow them to stay there ever again. Isn't that just the thing you do if you have any sense in your little head? Yes, of course. Now, I could go deeper on this as to why we might side with the kids, but here's the thing. It depends on which side you're on and what your values are. So if you're my friend and you own that hotel and this happens, I would say to you, kick those people out. What I say to my son is that when he wants to do things like smoke weed in a hotel or at school in the bathroom at lunchtime, maybe on a Tuesday in like November in sometime. Anyway, do a cost benefit analysis. Okay. So what are the chances you'll get busted? What are the chances you'll get hurt? What are the chances your future will be jeopardized? What are the chances you will suffer from this in some way or another? What are the benefits of it? Meaning, I don't approach this question through morality, right? I approach it through self-interest. So my son's interest is to smoke weed in your hotel room. Your interest is to protect that hotel room from people like my son. I say, you two go at it. And I would tell my son, there's this guy who owns that hotel. He's going to kick you out and it won't be good for you. You won't ever be able to stay there again. So it's probably just not a good idea to smoke weed in his hotel room. I don't say to him, that's a bad thing to do, son. A good person doesn't smoke weed in another person's property. I just say, it's probably going to work against you So generally speaking, you probably don't want to do that. And I would say to you all the time, unless you're completely stupid, I would say, kick those kids out of your hotel immediately. I don't say, well, the non-aggression principle says that we should all act in a particular way, and it is just a good thing to respect property rights. It's superstition. It's silly. It makes no sense to me. We have to have a politics of self-interest. So I preach self-interest to both parties, to all parties all the time. Now, here's the thing, though. There's nothing to worry about as a property owner, right? If we live in a society in which that's the cultural norm. Because most often, guess who actually wins?
The property owner.
Yeah. And they learn, and knucklehead 16-year-olds who want to smoke weed in a hotel room learn, right, don't they? Hello, markets, libertarians should know this. They learn pretty quickly, even the dumbest among them, that it works against them. And you know what ends up happening to them almost always? They stop being dumb 16-year-old weed-smoking losers.
So that leads into the ultimate question that I actually have, which is what happens when people can't agree on what the cultural norm is. Like you have the anarcho-capitalists and the anarcho-communists. They both believe that the state should not exist. I don't know if either one of them have an actual argument for how they could actually make that happen. But let's just say the state did vanish tomorrow, and some people say you can have personal property, and some people say you can't have personal property. One person is going to have to, in order to resolve that, more than likely, one side is going to have to resort to violence to either defend what they say is theirs or to defend the fact that it's not anybody's. So it's one of those things where you said earlier, when you say should, you should respect my personal property or my private property, or you should not have private property. When it's something like that, when it comes to property, how do we deal with that when both sides seem to be in the wrong?
By guns. I don't know. I mean, again, you can protect your property. You can protect anything. You can protect freedom of speech without making any moral claims at all. And in fact, I argue that it's more effective to not use morality, but to find other people who agree with you on something like property rights and join together. Hello, this is done all the time, right? It can be in housing. You've heard of this, right? Homeowners associations, what do? They hire security forces that are private, that they pay for, that even have guns, and they protect their homes. You can do that with hotels too. You can do it on your own if you want, if you can get away with it, right? What on earth is saying it's bad for 16-year-olds to smoke weed in a hotel? What is that going to produce in the minds of those 16-year-olds? They're going to hear that from you or me or the television or the president or whoever, and they're going to say, oh gosh, yeah, I guess that is a bad thing to do. I won't smoke weed anymore. You know exactly what the effect is. As a matter of fact, more often than not, it makes doing that more attractive. They're actually more likely to smoke weed in your hotel room.
Yeah.
Just let them learn the hard way.
Okay.
That's what I try to do with my son. I actually let him, as much as I can, learn these things the hard way. So like with schooling, I will say this. I have done this. I've basically decided not to intervene. I don't say, how are your grades? What homework do you have? Maybe you should get up at this time. Maybe you should go to bed earlier. Maybe you should do the homework first, blah, blah, blah. I don't say that anymore. I told him at the beginning of this year, it's up to you now. You're on your own. That's it. And if he gets an F, he gets an F.
Which is like the best lesson in the world. It's called cause and effect. It's pretty useful.
Yeah,
versus because I said so, which is what most parents do until kids graduate from high school.
It's science.
It just builds resentment. Exactly.
I'm pro-science.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. I just wanted to say thank you for this.
No, that was great.
You completely changed my attitude towards you throughout this weekend. So if anybody else is like me that was on the fence about you, maybe don't take my word for it.
Can we talk about gender as a social construct real quick? Just before you go. Just before you go.
Okay.
No, man. Thank you so much. That's great.
All right.
Thanks,
thank you.
Nathan. Which direction did I want to go next? Hennick, I think this would be a good time. I think this is a question that somewhat relates to some of the ground that we've covered so far, if I understood it correctly. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm already excited about this because of Hennick's former career. But if you don't want to talk about that, that's fine.
Oh, do you not want to talk about your former career?
We could go anywhere you want.
You go where you want to go.
So I like asking people most about critically thinking thoughts that are of their own expertise. So you talked a little bit about your own slight, or we'll learn, I guess, puritanical proclivities. So I want you to begin with yourself and talk about what your status quo ratio to Puritanism and hedonism is, what your ideal one is, what your ideal ratio of Puritans to hedons in society is, and how to get there.
You want like numbers, like 70-30, 50-50? Like in myself you're talking about.
In
like,
yourself and then society.
How do I live, what my impulses are, that kind of thing.
Like how you are, how you want to be, how you want society to be.
So my psychological hardwiring, how much, is that what you mean? Like how much of it is puritanical and how much of it is hedonistic? The hardwiring, meaning sort of what I had, at the time I started to have these ideas, these different ideas, right? Was probably 80 or 90% Puritan.
Wow.
So I don't know how much that's still the case, many, many years after thinking hard every day about this. I can tell you this, the way I live my life is pretty damn white bread and conventional. I used to be somewhat less conventional when I was an alcoholic, but I don't drink. I don't smoke marijuana. I don't take any illicit drugs. I have a monogamous relationship. We're not married, but for all intents and purposes, we are. I have a son. I am a committed father. I work a lot right now, especially. My God, I am my own enemy. I just realized. I'm going to go. Bye. Okay. Thanks for coming. Hopefully Thaddeus Russell will show up later. No, I mean, I've always been aware of that I'm not the renegades in my book. I've always been totally clear about that. And that's fine.
You're the vanguard.
No. No. I just know that I do know that the pleasures I do and have allowed myself to enjoy have largely come from them, those people, right? So, for instance, the obvious thing, and I've talked about this a lot, is like I've always been a big fan of what we call Black working class culture, right? So it became clear to me that there was bad Black people who produced that stuff, not the Martin Luther Kings of the world. And so I simply say, gosh, I really like that. I got a lot of pleasure from that stuff and some freedom from it, right? And I just want to announce to everyone that came from the bad Black people, not the good ones who are actually in your textbooks. That's it. So maybe we should have more of that stuff, and maybe we would have more fun as a society if we just allowed ourselves to look at the bad niggers, and that's what they were called, and say, actually, maybe in the words of Run DMC, maybe bad means good. So, I'm boring, puritanical guy, but at least I know what I am.
And society-wise, like the ratio, let's say, I mean, the what I'm trying to hypothetically think about is, let's say there's this crazy wild success, and tomorrow 300 million Americans say, we all believe what the Renegade University believes. Should we all should there be 100% renegades? Should it be 50-50, 70-30? What would be that ideal type of, how do you keep that tension going? Mm-hmm. Kind of like the tension you're discussing earlier.
So I mean, I think it's the third or fourth page of the book. In the introduction, I address this, which is that if the society is made up entirely of renegades, it's a living hell, right? Because there will be no bridges built, no roads built. There will be theft and murder and all sorts of bad stuff going on all the time unpunished. There won't be any books or internet or anything that I find valuable, because people will be living entirely for themselves, right? But conversely, if the society is made up entirely of renegades' enemies, the moral guardians, the upstanding good citizens, that may be a worse hell because there is no freedom. There's not even a concept of freedom. There's not a concept of the individual. There is none of the good stuff that I have found pleasure in my own life in this culture. So all I know is that in the United States in 2017, and ever since the people from England landed here, there's been plenty of puritanical guardians of communal norms and laws. So I haven't had to worry about there being too many renegades ever in the society. And it's pretty clear that in the United States that we are still clearly a more puritanical society than most other, certainly European societies and even other Asian societies too. What's the ratio in the United States now? I don't know, but roughly 50-50. So just really quickly, I'll just say that pop culture, even that isn't 100% renegade, right? There's plenty of pro-family, pro-nation, pro-responsibility stuff, even in pop culture in the United States now. Formal culture, what I call formal culture, what the politicians and teachers and big business leaders say, that's 100% pretty much. Well, except for our president. There's the exception, current president, but he'll be replaced by a pure Puritan, I promise you. So I guess it's more than 50% Puritan total. I don't know. So yeah, don't give up. I mean, I'm still on the side of believe me. In fact, well, here's the other thing. It's hard to find actual examples of renegades now. Yeah, people always ask me that, and I can't actually. It's hard for me to think of them.
The book almost has a mythical appeal. Like when you read it, and like I'm somebody who lives a similar life to his now. I'm not a parent, and I'm single. But other than that, it's like I don't drink. I work a lot on what's important to me. I had a much different lifestyle once. But when I read that book, I was like, well, when did the cops come? When did their girlfriend leave them? When did they, where were the consequences, right? Because anytime I tried to live like some of the stories in this book, or it just went through patterns like that, it was just so heavy with consequence that these people, now it's very clear, like right from the beginning of A Renegade History, that the people that the book is about are not cast as heroes in the book. And I think a lot of time people read the book and then they talk about it as if these people were heroes. There's that misconception. But they're important and they played an important role, but you wouldn't call a lot of these people heroic.
Yeah, I kind of do. Some of them.
Okay.
I mean, I think I do lionize slaves. I don't know if I use those words, hero or heroism, but yeah, I think I'm guilty of lionizing, the slaves, sure, who would leave the plantation for months at a time, or who would refuse to work when the slave master turned his back. I'm going to call them heroes, like I call Mike Brown a hero. I think the prostitutes in the West who did all those things that women are not supposed to do that we all consider to be essential freedoms now, those are heroes to me too. I don't have a problem with that. The mafia, on the other hand, who certainly took down prohibition from within, essentially. I'm not going to say hero. I'm going to call them useful. The drag queens at the Stonewall Inn in 1969 who threw bricks at the cops. Oh, heroes. How could they not be? I mean, again, I wouldn't recommend that to my friends or family to do such a thing because you can get killed real quick. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that's just an act of heroism. In other words, it's something that requires courage that serves something that I highly value.
It's a better way of saying it. There's nothing prescriptive about the book.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Except to relieve oneself of the judgment toward those renegades.
Yeah.
That's my prescription. If you want to live freer, don't judge them. Don't judge them. Don't moralize against them. See them either as useful or as heroes.
I don't know what this says about me, but when I read the book, it actually helped relieve some of the judgment that I had towards the people who set up the schools.
Oh God. See,
Yeah. Well, I just saw them as pure evil, right? Now, it added nuance, right? Which I think is a good thing,
Yeah.
because it's very easy to create a story of good and evil that's simple and comfortable, like lots of people do about everything that happens or has happened. So that was very like the John Taylor Gatto, Charlotte Iserby understanding of the progressive era and why these people wanted to set up schools and control everybody. Yeah, it's very easy for it to fit that kind of good evil framework, or that they were the antagonists in that story. But if you can actually like experience that time period of the middle late 1800s and understand what the landscape, the social landscape of America looked like, you start to understand a lot about why all of these conversations were happening in government, in higher education. And it at least gives you some. It humanized, these people were human beings, so to humanize them is useful, right? To understand them better.
Yeah, I think the idiom that goes the road to hell is paved with good intentions highlights this point pretty well.
In a lot of cases,
Like,
sure.
You can say that from their point of view, from their value framework, as you were mentioning a lot this weekend, it was the good in their point of view, total control of the whole world, creating a world government, whatever that, it's the good, right?
Mm-hmm.
The public good
to them.
to them from their framework, and just try to see if your self-interest can align. Is there anything in there? If any of your ends are the same, and it's just about a means different, can you sit at a table and come up with creative ways of collaboration, even with some of these advocates? And maybe you can't, but maybe it's a conversation.
Or actually,
worth having.
sometimes means can align, but the ends don't, and you can align yourself. Like with the mafia, for instance, right? They invested in the first gay bars in this country, not because they were pro-gay or liberationists, because they wanted to make a buck and they saw an opportunity in that black market, right? But yeah, I'm really glad they did that, and it was a good thing they did. They weren't good people, and their intentions weren't exactly my intentions. But yeah, I align myself with that particular means to a different end.
It happens on the other side too, right? Like the progressives and the industrialists, their ends aligned to a certain extent.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like John Dewey said, I want to figure out better how to be the rudder, that steers the big ship. And, the Rockefellers and the other industrials said, great, let us know what you find out, at Columbia University. So
Dewey is a great segue if we have time for the other question. Brett and I had some side conversations about Dewey's enemy, Dr. Montessori, and the Sunbury system as well.
Yeah.
So if you had $1 billion, if you had some billionaire who agreed with you, what would you do with it? To like what type of schools or unschool schools or whatever you want to call them would you build? Or alternatively, if you don't like the billionaire thing, if you were in Betsy DeVos's position, for example, what would you do?
I feel like that is a question that only a completely insane megalomaniac would want. I'm not trying to cop out of it, but it's just like, build a system on what scale? Like how many regions of the country does it involve, right? Like I couldn't build it. Can I build a system, even if it has all the educational values that I want to promote, like in a school like the Circle School that I visited, or the Columbus Learning Co-op that I visited, or a Sudbury School that has a lot of good things? Is that the best thing for Los Angeles, like right now?
You know what your question was? No
What?
offense. It was a John Dewey question, because he was about managing people and figuring out the best way to manage them. And of course, a great way to manage them is to get $1 billion. Now, that wasn't his prescription. I mean, he wanted to seize control of the state, which he did a pretty good job of. But that was, in fact, his argument with another of his enemies, Randolph Bourne. During World War I, Randolph Bourne, Dewey's student at Columbia, said to Dewey in a famous exchange, "These progressives clearly are interested mostly in organizing, measuring, managing, regulating, and ordering other people. And that's why the war to them is very attractive, because they know that they'll get conscription and a draft and people living in barracks in rows, and everyone will wear the same uniform. Everyone will look the same. And we won't be able to drink alcohol anymore. And that will make everyone more orderly and sober and rational. and good citizens. And that's why progressives are so interested in this war and wanting to go into it. That what was underneath the entire thing was this thing that is just in some people and in other people it's not, which is this desire to manage other people. And so, that's kind of what your question was getting at there. Right?
I would say that it's the inverse of that.
All right.
And this is great that you brought this up, because it was earlier you were quoting from the Gospel of Matthew, right? And about the missionaries who wanted to travel to China. And it was interesting because you quoted the verse, that would say, "Go ye forth and baptize all nations in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit," which is a call to action to go forth. But you were talking about it in the context and aligning it with imperialist. So I see a fundamental distinction between kind of state and non-state actors, right? And so it looks like what Dewey is calling for, as you said, and you said seizing the state, is calling for using this monopoly of violence, these goons with guns to go do that, which is coercion, versus what Jesus is calling for in that passage, and what I was calling for right now in asking for what would you do if a megalomaniacal billionaire gave it to you, is rather persuasion. So it's about persuasion and influence rather than managing it. And in a sense, this whole Renegade University is in fact a form of, maybe don't see it that way, but is a form of persuasion. And as is the School Sucks podcast, which I don't view as coercion.
Because if somebody really said, what would you do with $1 billion with a suitcase, or I guess a pile of suitcases? I would certainly think about it.
But Henrik, what I did not do was say, Henrik, I will give you $1,000 to come to this weekend. And if you change your mind according to my ideas during the weekend, I'll give you another $1,000.
I would like that.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I would be a miniature Bill Gates, correct? So I think Bill Gates is on a John Deweyan mission, and he's changing societies in Africa and South Asia, right? With money, not with state power, not really sometimes, but basically with his own money. And he's essentially, is he not, kind of bribing people to change their minds and change their ways of life. Now, again, this is a problem for libertarians, is it not? Because he doesn't need state power. I don't know how much he's used state power, but he certainly doesn't need it. That's a tough one.
It depends on what type of a libertarian, because whether you want to call them left libertarians or the market anarchists, the framework they would bring to that is that pretty much in every scenario, the way that wealth was accumulated was because of artificially propped state power. So without the so-called intellectual property monopoly, could he have accumulated all that Microsoft wealth?
There will be billionaires, won't there, in the Rothbardian utopia?
I don't know if there will be.
And when there's billionaires in the Rothbardian utopia, I have a feeling they will be able to bribe people to change their minds. I don't know. I think it's a problem. I haven't thought through this, but that just occurred to me.
I don't know. So, let's get there.
All right. Next time.
Thanks, Henrik. All right, so we have time for one more person in part one, and then we'll take a break and switch locations. I'm going to bring up Matt D. Hey, Matt.
Hey.
And this I thought was a very, very interesting topic, and this morning we tried to think of some examples of this.
I have more context to bring to this.
Oh, all right, cool.
Just a little bit more. I was just trying to be brief earlier. But I have a question about renegade history and assimilation. Particularly, just as a context, I also have a lot of comments for your talk earlier. As a Baptist theologian.
Oh, another Baptist theologian.
Yeah. No, the whole vanguard of your fans.
Go ahead.
Definitely felt the heat rise a little bit. You have a lot to say, but just a particular question on assimilation. In your book, you chart out the process through a number of renegades were assimilated into American culture. And you have this kind of like process for how they got there. I'm wondering if you have any examples of groups that were originally part of the American we and slipped down the slope, And I asked that question because that's actually a big question that is being talked about a lot in Christian circles right now, as we're dealing with the question of like, America seems to be getting less and less and less Christian. And so we're all scrambling, trying to figure out how does this, how do we change what we're doing?
Yeah.
And how do we deal with this? So, and I'm in my small spheres of influence actively trying to disassimilate my people.
Wait a second. Okay, so as to your question of did any group disassimilate? I don't even know what that's a word. I guess it's probably a word.
I don't think so.
Slide back.
Slide down the scale.
So you kind of answered
away
your
from
own
full
question,
inclusion.
didn't you? Because you just said that the country is less and less Christian, and it
Yes.
certainly is. I got to think that's partly because a lot of Christians aren't Christian anymore.
Fair point.
And
Won't
less,
dispute that.
And when you become less Christian, usually you become less American in a sense, right? Less of a good American, right? Those things are very much aligned and always have been.
Right.
So, what's going on? Wait, what? You want to disassimilate Christians?
Yeah, trying to figure out how
What
to
does
get
that
them
mean?
to stop, think of ourselves as Christians, but not necessarily Americans.
Oh, okay. Christian separatists.
Maybe.
Okay. Sure. Do it.
I'm trying. I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions for how to make that possible, since you've spent a lot of time thinking about what it means to be fully assimilated.
So,
How do you?
I mean, that has been a thing, right?
Mhm.
You probably know this better than I do, but I'm thinking, haven't there been? Yeah, there have been Christian separatist movements in this country for a long, long time. I mean, I'm thinking all the way back to like the communes, the famous, about the communes, the utopian communes in the 19th century. I don't know.
A few of them, yeah.
Like upstate New York. They would go off and establish basically they were the precursors to the hippie communes.
Right.
But they were Christian sects, and they would buy a piece of land in upstate New York and they would have a community there and they would live according to their own particular denomination's rules. And, it was great times for them, whatever, but they weren't really American anymore.
Right.
So, I mean, I think also because you're Christian, you can probably get away with it. You could just do that right now.
Yeah.
So land is important, right? It's not necessary, but if you had some land, you could actually make it happen pretty much
living
immediately.
in the city. That's the thing.
You can also be, so the history of nationalism, so black nationalists kind of found this out. Yeah, probably first. They said, land would be good on which to establish our own black nation, but we don't need it. So the Nation of Islam has rarely talked about seizing land or even buying land. What they've mostly talked about, people miss this. I'm not a huge fan of the Nation of Islam, but they have had some useful moments. And one of them was, what we got to do? Just establish businesses that are black owned, that maybe, only sell to black customers, but certainly are black owned, to establish black economic power, which of course establishes in turn black political power. So it becomes essentially a black nation within a different nation, another nation. And so that's certainly one way to go, because economic power is political power and cultural power. So if you want to do that, I think regardless of whether you're a nationalist or a Christian separatist or whatever, just want to leave America without actually leaving the United States, you can do it that way.
I think I'm not so much talking about like separatists so much as just becoming worse and worse citizens.
In what way?
Less invested in the American project.
Like with foreign policy stuff, right?
Because
you told me earlier that you were originally, or there was you had a political awakening in a sense, right? Around war?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess I self-radicalized during seminary I started reading a bunch of Mennonites and nonviolent Christians, and they were just talking about things in ways that I'd never heard before.
So there's a long tradition of fantastic Christian anti-war activists. Okay. And in a sense, they were always bad Americans in that way. But if you're talking about the values of Christianity regarding things like the body, right? Like sex and the family, that's a different thing. So if you want
I'm not sure, at least on that area, there's much that we're willing to give up.
That's what I'm saying.
Although
if you want to be anti-war Christians, you can, and there's a long tradition you can tap into, and it's not a small tradition either. The Berrigans, I don't know if you know about them, but right. So there's a long tradition of that, which, whether it's consistent with Scripture I don't know. But, it's a great tradition from my point of view because they were some of the most principled and militant anti-war activists in this country's history. So if you want to just opt out of the foreign policy piece of being an American, that has and can be done as Christians. But if you you still want to be upholding chastity, frugality, humility, modesty, the family, discipline, right?
Yeah.
Then, well, here's the thing. I mean, you're less of a renegade, but I don't care. That's fine. That's up to you. But it's an easier job. In other words, you have much less to do, right?
Fair point.
But you're going to still be mostly American. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to be anti-war Americans.
Mm-hmm.
You're not renouncing citizenship by being anti-war.
No.
Necessarily. Or you're not renouncing an American identity either, necessarily.
Is there something else that's troubling you about it?
No.
Although maybe I'm wrong, actually, come to think of it. Maybe war and empire and expansion has always been, as academics say, constitutive of America and the American identity.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm willing to say that 100%, but I don't know that.
Oh, wait a second.
Your argument seems to be close to it,
Maybe.
Or at least not so much that it's a necessity, but that is the way that we have ended up.
You know what I was saying about, how the founding fathers were expansionists and basically promoting an empire
Empire of
from
Liberty.
the very, very beginning. Yeah, Thomas Jefferson and Washington, all of them. You know what? Now I'm thinking, you made me think of this. Maybe I've been wrong about this, what I just said to you. Maybe, in fact, being anti-war is anti-American, or at least un-American. So that being anti-war
certainly
might
un-American.
actually be, maybe I do think this. Just being anti-war and anti-empire in itself is a renunciation of America and the American identity. Yeah.
Original intent.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the original intent of the country, it was expansionist from
Right.
from 1800
So
on.
as I
That
argued,
is true, and just the fact that we are a nation that was, we tell the mythological story of America starts with a great battle that we won.
yeah, and so that, as I said to you earlier, this weekend, the Declaration of Independence in my reading is actually an imperialist document, right? And so that is, everyone agrees, the founding document of America and what it is to be American.
Agreed. I might quibble on imperialist a little bit, but
Okay.
but I don't have it in front of me, so we'll do that later.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I think
but
good. Yeah, no, it's great.
it's been a hard sell so far in the church culture I've been involved
Just to be
in.
anti-war, really?
Just extremely so.
Is
I'm more on the conservative side rather than the liberal side. So,
But there are many Christians who
There are
anti-war.
not so much on the conservative political or conservative theological side, which is more where I make my home.
Okay.
So, it's just for me. It seems like those are two things that are distinct ideas, but they're so tightly intertwined when it comes to people's reckoning of their own identity. They can't break those two
Well, let me
apart.
just say, if you're successful in that, God bless you. Because I don't care how you and other Christians live your lives at all. I don't care if you live in a completely sterile, ascetic monk's life. I don't care at all, as long as you don't impose it on me. But if you help dismantle the war state, then
my ambitions aren't that big.
I love you.
but-
So please do it. Yeah, I love it. Please.
Yeah, I think
Go forth, as Jesus said.
We have more people who have questions. We are currently joined by Marcy and Olivia. How did I do that before? From Hawaii, who came all the way from Hawaii. Why did you guys come all the way from Hawaii for this?
It was the closest it was going to ever be to us in Hawaii, I think.
True. But still, that's quite a trek, right?
Yeah. Do you want to know why we came to here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we have a habit of being in places that aren't probably designed for us.
And
And we homeschool, and this seemed like the best way to introduce Olivia to ideas that aren't necessarily our own. So that's because I can tell her what we think or how we think, but I can't tell her about what somebody else argues for.
So I saw this thing. where over the course of the weekend, Thaddeus would say something.
Yeah.
And I would go, ooh, I wouldn't say that in front of a mother and her daughter. And then I looked at you guys, and you would often just kind of turn and say something quickly
And
to
laugh.
Olivia.
Yeah.
So I was, I was imagining, like, what is she saying to her? Like, no, not that. No, no. Or was it something like that? But yeah, I was just interested. It was an observation that I made.
Normally when I turned her, I'd laugh and say he's wrong or he's got that backwards. There's very little we don't say in front of Olivia.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, throughout most of the proceedings, I was very aware of you two, right? Because
Sorry.
I know, and intrigued because I know that for me, it would be an awkward situation to be I just think about, being a freshman in high school and coming to see Thaddeus Russell with my mom or my dad, right? It would be, I don't know, uncomfortable. So how was it for you, Olivia?
It was it was fine. It was normal.
Normal.
normal. It's not strange. This is not a strange thing.
What other challenges like this have you guys done?
We take our kids into spaces that we think they can benefit from, generally without regard to whether kids belong there.
Oh.
So restaurants, movies, cultural events, that's homeschoolers. We're out when you're not supposed to be out, and we're trying things you don't try. So that's normal. She doesn't really think there's a place that she's not supposed to be.
So let me get this straight. So you brought your daughter here to expose her to ideas that were not only different than yours, but contrary to yours?
Yes.
Oh, so you disagree with me on fundamental stuff?
Majorly.
Oh. I didn't know that until right now.
Yeah.
Wow. So first of all, you brought your daughter across an ocean to be exposed to not just different ideas, but, right, like
Correct.
oppositional ideas,
Yes.
opposing ideas.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, I can't even imagine a better education. That is the best education.
Right.
On that, I think we agree.
Right.
Yeah.
When I wasn't sure if I disagree with you on everything, I had to hear your argument. And I still haven't, I don't know if I disagree with you or not. I hear things that I thought you got wrong, but
Yeah.
I don't know where that sits. I don't know.
God, I mean, can you imagine if, professors did that? Just forced themselves to listen to opposing arguments?
Right.
Or even, journalists and political pundits and all those people who talk about these things all the time for a living? In my experience, none of them do, or very few of them do. They certainly don't go, they won't even read, a website or a news outlet that's different than theirs, which just requires a click.
Right.
You flew across the ocean, basically, to do this.
Correct.
And brought your daughter.
And right now,
That's amazing.
there are
That's
people
amazing.
5 years older than you, Olivia, at just, the launch pads to success and professional happiness, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, and they're not getting that experience that you had this weekend at all in 4 years, a lot of them. So that's amazing. You're that puts you way ahead, I think. That's really so. What was?
Wait, hold on. No, I don't. Right now, I only care about one thing. So, Olivia, who's right, your mom or me?
Me?
That's my kid.
Good answer.
Right.
Again, your mom and I. Hey, we're finding agreement
Right.
here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is astonishing to me. I just cannot believe this.
I
In a good way,
definitely-
in the best way. This is amazing to me.
definitely disagree with some of your ideas. And I agree with most of hers. Not all of them. None.
Oh, do tell. Where do you not agree with your mom?
None that I could specifically state. But some...
Oh, that my way of being is the best.
What do you
You
mean?
think I'm irresponsible sometimes.
Only if you guys,
Sometimes.
whoever's talking, put the mic right up to their mouth. Yeah, and if somebody else talks, we'll do that move.
You think you would be... You've expressed that you would parent differently
Oh.
right?
Can I hear about this, please?
There's some things that I would disagree with, like, God, what are some? I disagree with your introduction to adult content.
To adult content.
She introduced me to all of that at like 8.
Okay, when you say adult content,
We freely talk about sex or drugs or crime.
that's a
or-
terrible thing to do to a child.
Right? Right.
Okay, so when I was dropping all the F-bombs,
She hears them from mom sometimes.
because I had the same feeling that Brett did. I was always, not always, but I was often
Right.
worried about you.
Right.
Well, you know what? There actually was another mother-daughter duo at the first one of these weekends, and they actually left after the first session. And we don't know exactly why, but we're pretty sure that had something to do with it. But you hung in there. You stayed all the way through.
Right. Well, yeah,
So I think you're different than they were,
sure.
clearly.
Right. And don't get me wrong, I don't show her adult content, but we don't hide that people enjoy sex. We're married Christian people, so we believe it's good and great.
Can I say what you told me about who your husband is?
Sure.
An army chaplain, right? U.S. Army chaplain.
Anglican priest.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of those in my crowds.
Probably not.
No, yeah. Or their wives or daughters. So, okay, so Olivia, you disagree with your mom about her doing that?
At the moment, I just really hated it because it was so uncomfortable, which I think that's the case for almost everybody my age. Maybe when I'm older, I'll realize why. At the moment, I just hated it. So I would like to imagine that I would do differently.
What's
I
that?
don't like how loud you listen to your music.
Your mom rocks out?
Yes.
What does she listen to?
God, what does she not listen to? She doesn't listen to, like, the modern dubstep. That's about it.
Dubstep is the only thing that she rules out. But she
Yeah.
she blasts it
Oh, yeah.
when you're trying to study at home because you're a
Yes,
homeschooler.
a lot.
Mom. She's trying to study. Do you want your daughter to be successful?
I want her to be what she wants to be.
All right. So, I mean, I could guess where we disagree. I don't know because you haven't said yet. You want to? We don't have. I won't argue with you, but I'm just curious. Olivia wants me to argue with you, but
Yeah, she does.
No,
Well,
I'm just.
She does. Yeah, because I'm very argumentative with her.
Okay.
So
Well,
she loves that.
let's go then.
Right. So I definitely believe that there is a God. So
Okay.
that would be one place that we disagree.
Okay.
So there's that. I also disagree that Christianity or religion is not free, because I feel more free. I have more freedom than I think others who don't have faith have.
Yep.
So I feel more free.
Yep.
The whole sex thing, I think we have more and better sex.
Christians have better sex than non-Christians, or
I'm just going to go with myself in my
Oh.
own relationships.
you and your husband have better
Yeah, you
sex
said-
than the rest of us.
No, just than I would if I didn't have the beliefs about what sex is.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So if I didn't have that view, probably wouldn't have as much.
So, can you unpack that a little bit?
Well, I think sex is good. It's made for pleasure and enjoyment. I think it bonds my husband and I together, and it does things for him as far as clearing his mind, making him feel loved, making him, opposite of what you said, productive. So I want to give those things to him, and having sex provides those things. So even if I don't feel like it, like physically, I'm not, I want to have sex. But like, I love him, so I want to give him these things.
So, this is not my criticism, but what would you say to the typical feminist criticism of what you just said? which is that, at least to a feminist, I think that would sound, this is not
Right.
me. This is not me talking. That
Sure.
sounds patriarchal, that you're serving
Oh,
your
right.
husband's needs, right? Okay.
Right, but that was only half the equation. Here's what, sex does those things for me as well.
Oh, okay.
So but in the Christian framework, I want to give to and love him, and he wants to give to and love me. And so then we do this thing for each other.
Where do we disagree?
I don't know. I thought you said sex, when you get married, you have less sex.
Oh, I'd say generally speaking that's true.
Right.
That is most certainly not true in all cases.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know it's possible. I know it's happened that people have more sex in a marriage than they do. Well, okay. So I'm a serial monogamist, and I've been married,
Right.
so I know what that's about.
Right.
And I actually am pretty sure I've had more sex because of that than if I had been single that whole time.
Right.
Oh yeah. So I get
Okay.
that totally. Just in general, most, I think this is safe to say, most long-term marriages or monogamous relationships, the sex tends to dwindle over time. Yeah. What do you think?
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe.
Generally, we try not to deal in absolutes around here,
Yes, I
obviously.
know. I
But
was like-
over time, like I have also noticed that pattern. I'm 40, and I
Okay.
am a serial monogamist who has never been married. But I have been in many long-term relationships, and I'm looking. I would like to find the person I could spend the rest of my life with. But yes, over time in a relationship, it is very intense in the beginning, and then it's becomes more infrequent. And gosh, dare I say, even more of a chore
So, okay.
as it goes on.
So as for Christianity and how this works, so the other thing that I'm pretty sure about is that, well, first of all, what denomination?
Anglican.
Oh, okay. So among, there are just infinite Protestant and Christian denominations
Yes.
and sects, and right. So, and they all have the different ideas about what the Bible says, right?
Yes.
And so it's kind of an infinite variety, and even on the question of sex. And I know of many Christian groups, denominations, sects, sects, that would have resembled what you would call like a free love hippie attitude toward sex. Maybe somewhat similar to your attitude about sex, except it sounds like you're committed to monogamy, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't see any contradiction there at all.
Okay.
And I think you can read the Bible to support exactly what you do with your husband and your family. I don't see any contradiction at all.
Okay.
But let's see. So how long have you been married?
20 years.
20 years, and you're still saying this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you have a special marriage.
That's amazing. That's really wonderful.
No, I just think that's a special marriage.
Yes, absolutely.
I just think it's empirically provable. It's been demonstrated that you're unusual. That's
Okay.
all. That's all. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I accept that.
So, I was going to say that nonetheless, though, the major denominations in Protestantism and Catholicism, Christianity generally, I think this is true. I know this is true. Marriage was explicitly intended to curb the sexuality of men and women. That was one of the purposes, not the only one, but one of the purposes. I mean, it was stated. Now, again, it doesn't mean they spoke for Christianity, right? When they said that, or they were correct about
Right.
in their interpretation
Okay,
of the Bible.
yes. Maybe they said that, but I think they got
have.
that wrong.
Many have, that's all. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's fair.
Well, I mean, yeah. So, no, I think we're fine then.
Okay. I do believe that there's truth.
Okay.
So,
That's fine.
yeah.
I could ask you to prove it.
I don't feel like I need to prove truth or not.
Then again,
So, like-
we're fine.
Right. Right.
Let's. I think we could spend a moment on that one.
Okay, so Marcy, let me ask you this:
Yes.
Do you want me to change my life
No.
or the way I think?
No. No.
We're best friends. What's the problem?
Right.
You mean we agree on everything? We're fine. But I do absolutely love that you did this, that you came all the way here because you thought you disagreed with me?
Well, it's not that I believe you have an inherent nature and freedom that was put in there by God. So I don't want you to be forced or compelled anything. I would have hope that you would have something else, but I don't want to change it, because that's takes away your human dignity, your volition.
Okay, so I think it is possible that that's true. A, and
Right.
B, even better, I hope that it's true.
Okay.
And C, I live as if it were true.
Okay.
I organize my life. I treat other
Right.
people
Right.
as if that were true.
Right.
So I'm waiting to hear what our problem is.
Well, I thought you didn't believe we had any inherent nature. That, there's nothing true absolutely about me. But I believe there's absolute truth about me,
So
and I believe there's absolute truth about you. So that's where we differ.
And I think there might be truth about you, about me,
Okay.
about tables, about chairs, about morality, about everything, about
Okay.
Jesus and the rest of it, God, all of it.
Okay.
There might be truth about all those things. I just don't know because I haven't seen it yet.
Right.
That's all.
So that's where we differ.
So we're cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no beef at all with believers in truth or God or any of that.
Right, that's
unless
very
they want
clear.
to make me
Right.
change my ideas
Sure.
or the way I live, especially if they use, force against me in some way, right?
Right. That's always been very clear. You're very
So,
clear about that.
yeah.
You don't have any problems with it.
Okay. So what else?
That we don't agree about?
Yeah, come
Well, you gotta.
I mean, I think your approach to education is suspect.
It is super shady.
Just kidding. I think you're exposing your daughter to some dangerous things.
Right. So
No,
I probably
I
don't
think that's I think you're just doing the most amazing thing ever in terms of educating.
Okay.
Educating a child as an adult or parent can ever do.
Okay, thanks.
I want that to be right on the table. I think that was clear
Okay.
from the beginning, but it's astonishing what you're doing here.
Okay.
And the best possible. Come on. I mean, intellectually, of course, that's how you become smarter and better.
Right.
As
How
a
do you,
thinker. So.
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How do you deal with? There must be the existence, maybe not, but I would think there'd be the existence of some apprehension that Olivia would wind up. Maybe it's not even apprehension. Maybe the answer is you don't care. With a different set of values, a different faith through these exposures. Is your faith in her faith, or your faith maybe that's redundant, but your faith a kind of something that you feel makes it easier for you to do these things?
Can I just break?
So that was like a couple
Yeah.
of questions.
This is actually relevant because
Okay.
what were we talking about earlier tonight when we were off mic and I think it was Jason called it what was it about trafficking, about you being worried about her being trafficked.
Yeah.
What was it?
Don't get trafficked.
Don't get trafficked. And he said it's DGT, right? So do the DGT. Don't get trafficked, and that's what you were worried. You were worried about Olivia getting trafficked apparently when you sent her to San Francisco.
I wasn't.
by herself
Right.
to do a sailing trip or
Yeah.
something. Well, but you have been worried.
No, I just said don't.
Oh, just don't make.
Just don't get trapped.
Well,
Don't be
okay.
stupid.
So I mean, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
So I think Brett's asking, right?
Yeah.
That you're exposing her to all these things that you don't like, right? Or you think
Yeah.
are dangerous, or that you oppose, and maybe she'll be seduced by one of them.
So I've seen people not exposed, seduced away. So that would be a dumb response, because how many kids grow up in Christian homes and leave that faith? So that's not successful.
Oh, they're the ones who are the most seduced, I think.
Sure. So
Yeah.
that wouldn't be a good strategy. But mainly, I have confidence in the thing we believe, that it's not at risk to ideas, because I believe it's truth. And truth isn't, and light isn't afraid of anything. So if I take seriously what the Bible says it is, and who God is, and who we are, and our purposes, and all those things, then they're not in danger from any other idea or thought process or situation. There's
Why?
no risk,
Why?
because That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know why it's.
Well, when we were talking earlier, you said that you guys have traveled a lot.
Tons.
And, oh, no, and you've lived in 6 different places.
Yeah.
Olivia has in
Yes.
14 years of life. She's lived in 6 different places across the country.
Right.
And traveled alone, right?
Right.
And I said to her, what did I say? I said something like, that makes you tougher, smarter, able to adapt, in a sense, more independent and stronger, which means that she is actually safer,
Correct.
right? You've made her safer, right? By making her
Correct.
stronger and more independent in those ways.
Right.
She is less likely, in fact, to be trafficked or victimized or attacked or exploited in all sorts of ways, right?
Right.
Yeah. Isn't that a big part of it?
Sure.
So,
But I mean, maybe
yeah.
more with she is spiritually safe because I believe what we believe is true. So if it's true, then maybe other ideologies can't really tear it down. They can't defeat it.
Okay.
So, and keeping her from those isn't going to make her more safe from falling away or whatever the horrible thing would
wait,
be.
Marcy, but you do know, of course, that many people who have grown up believing in your truth
Correct.
fully
Right.
have fallen away and done other
Absolutely.
things. So my father, for instance, right,
Absolutely.
grew up in a Mormon household.
Right.
Father was a minister,
Right.
Mormon minister, and my father, maybe as you know, became a nudist,
Yeah.
pot smoking
Yeah,
hippie,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah. Right. So he completely fell away and never came back, by the way.
Right.
Yeah. So it can happen.
Maybe what I'm saying
Even
is,
if you are right and all these things are true, right, it can still happen.
But I mean, her whole trajectory of life. If her life is set, and she had accepted and chooses for herself to live this way, then I'm not risking that future by letting her see these other ideas. That she can bump up against other ideas and say, okay, what do I do with this because it contradicts that? Or, here's this trajectory, but it's not what I chose for myself. So if she's going to have a life that way, then that's the one she's going to have. If she's going to live a life of faith, then it doesn't matter what she encounters. She's going to live that life of faith. And if she's not, it doesn't matter how I hide her, and it doesn't matter what I protect her from, she's not.
Okay, so you acknowledge it's possible she will.
Of course.
It's possible for her to live a life
Of course.
not of faith.
Of course.
Oh, okay. So you know what's happening right now for me? You're pretty much converting me to Christianity.
All right. Well done. Excellent.
I think I need to be baptized now. Because
There's a pool.
There's a pool.
We should get a photo because it looks really nice at night. If that's not like too personal a thing for you, Thad.
yeah, so I mean, I still I got
Maybe I'm simplistic, but if the truth is that...
Well, I don't know about you, but I have no problems with
Okay.
anything you've said at all.
Okay.
At all. In fact,
Excellent.
more than that, I really like much of what you've said.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we're good.
Yeah.
So I'm now going to try to convert Olivia.
Okay. To what?
I was just kidding.
To what?
I just did for 2 days. And I don't know. We'll see if it worked. We'll see who wins.
Sure. To what?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe nothing. Maybe we agree. I don't know.
Yeah. There no conversion attempt took place.
Actually, maybe we really do. I don't know. I mean, let's see. I mean, yeah, you're not puritanical, really, although I guess you believe in monogamy as a good thing.
I believe monogamy is the best thing.
But in part because it makes the sex better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, that is Thad Russell. Boom. Right there. That's exactly what I think and always have think, and that's how I've lived my life. Do you think other people would be better off if they were monogamous?
So it's probably going to depend on how you define better off.
So now you're a relativist too.
No.
So now I like you even more and
There's
more.
no...
We're having problem. We're having a problem having problems.
Let's do the military then.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding. No, yeah, I think I mean, it depends if you measure long-term peace of mind and happiness, and you're producing kids, and then you find meaning in that. And what's, probably monogamy, the way the Bible lays out, is super good idea, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But maybe if you're not doing the other things, monogamy is going to be kind of hard. I don't know.
Did you say what denomination you are?
Anglican.
Oh, right, Anglican. Yeah. That's
we don't have
not Episcopalian.
No.
Anglican.
Quite not Episcopalian.
Okay.
Quite conservative.
Yeah.
That's a whole.
Anglicans in the United States.
That's what I was thinking. I've never heard of that outside of England.
Right. So the Anglican Church in North America is, different from the Episcopal Church. They were, in brief, a missionary movement from Anglican priests from Africa who saw the way the Episcopal form of church was going to the United States, that it was becoming less and less biblical.
Correct.
So they sent their priests and started these churches.
Where did it start? Where did they come into America and settle?
No, I don't know that. It's more recent. It's not
middle 1800s,
No,
late 1800s, early
no.
1900s.
probably even later than that.
Really interesting.
Because oh wow, yeah, that is interesting. I didn't know that, but yeah, the Episcopalians, of course, have gay priests now, right?
Right.
And gay bishops, right? Even don't they
Yeah.
have a gay yeah, right.
Yeah.
They've fallen, certainly. I see. So you're the true Episcopalians in a sense, or whatever, or the true Anglicans, I guess, is actually what you are. Right. I don't think I've ever met a Christian I had any problem with,
Right.
honestly. And that includes just sort of public figures, too. I mean, I may not agree with them, but they've never bothered me at all. I've never seen them as a threat in any way. I never care about. And it's one of the reasons all my lefty progressive friends get pissed off at me.
Right.
Is that it's like, don't you see what's going on in America? All these Christians are trying to do all these things. It's like not actually true in my world. In fact, Christians have virtually no power at all in my world, the world I live in.
Sure.
Or the world that any of the people I know live in, really. I'd say Christians are pretty powerless these days, as a matter of fact. But on top of that, the actual Christians I've known in my life have never attempted to convert me, change the way I live, change the way I think. I can't even remember them moralizing against me, telling me I'm doing anything bad or wrong, suggesting that I would be happier or live better if I lived differently according to the Bible, or any of that. I cannot, now that I'm thinking about this, I don't think I've ever experienced that in my life. And I've been around, believe it or not, a lot of Christians. And by the way, let me just say quickly, the best professor I've ever had, the only really good professor I've ever had, really changed my life in college, was, guess what? The chaplain at my college, Al Denman. He was a minister.
Sure.
So I've always been fond of Christians, as a matter of fact. Isn't that weird?
Not to me.
We need to work harder on hating each other.
I'm sorry. I never.
All right, let's talk
hated
about the
you.
military.
All right.
So he's a Army, U.S. Army chaplain.
U.S. Army. Hua.
And has he always done that? Is that
No.
What did
he
you do before
was
then?
pastored first for about 5 years, and then he joined up.
pastor in the Anglican Church?
No.
Uh-oh.
Probably out. He was a Baptist pastor.
Oh, wow. Where are you from?
I'm from Southern California.
Oh, you're from here.
Yes.
What part?
Glendora
Okay, yeah.
by Pasadena.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
He's from the Midwest. He pastored out. We met in grad school.
Oh, you went to graduate school. The plot thickens.
Yeah.
Which graduate school? And what?
Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary
Huh. Where's that?
in Massachusetts.
Oh, where in Massachusetts?
Do you know a town called Hamilton?
Oh, sure.
So Hamilton. There.
Yeah.
There.
Interesting.
Were you wanting to be clergy?
I was wanting to be educated in theology and exegesis and all those things.
Were you raised religious?
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
I was.
In what church?
A Presbyterian church in Glendora.
Like church-going family?
Yes.
It was an important part of your life?
Yes.
Okay. So you met in seminary.
Yes.
Your husband, soon to be husband, or later to be husband.
Yes.
And you dated for a while.
No.
Oh.
We dated for 3 or 4 months, got engaged. We were married within about a year.
Did you live with him before you married him?
No.
Did you have sex with him before you married him?
No. No form thereof.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Your daughter's sitting right next to you, so
She knows all that.
I feel like I
We
shouldn't
talk
ask
about that
the next
all the
question.
time.
There's another question to be
Okay.
asked. I'm not sure I should
Go
ask
for
it. Had you ever been with other men before then?
No.
Oh my.
I waited.
What's that?
I waited.
You waited, yeah.
I did.
Okay, wow. And how old were you then?
When I got married,
Yeah.
22.
Oh my gosh. And no regrets, clearly.
None.
Yeah.
I think it's worked out better,
Yeah.
but it's only anecdotal.
No, I just really have no problems whatsoever. In fact, I wish more people were like you, believe it or not. I really, oh my God. In fact, I pray every day that more people were like you. I do.
Okay.
I don't think you're a threat at all. And I think actually you're a contribution to human freedom, believe it or not.
Good.
I mean, why should I be afraid of you? I mean, why should I think you're a problem? Should I be opposed to you? Should I be arguing against you? What would I
no.
say against you?
I think probably I thought that I'm the wrong things. I'm conservative. I'm Christian. I'm monogamous. I waited. I don't work. So there's none of the. I'm not an anti-feminist, but definitely not a. I don't know. Just if you just do the little details on the surface, I look like not the Renegade history listener.
Yeah. So you know who's a better Christian than you?
Who?
Progressives. Because I hear from them all the time that essentially I'm not being Christian enough. They don't use that word, of course,
Sure.
but you know that I'm not selfless enough, that I'm not self-sacrificing enough, that that I'm not concerned about the community enough, that I don't give myself over to other people and their needs enough, that I'm selfish.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are the evangelizers, who moralize against me and try to shame me and other people, of course. And then on top of that, as you know, right, they try to force us to live according, really, actually, to, I think, Christian precepts.
So you keep. That's probably where
with the law. Okay.
I think
Yeah.
you keep calling things Christian that I don't think really are. I think they've been taken over by maybe somebody with an agenda and said, if you are for this, that is the Christian thing to do. And I don't know.
Okay. So being rich,
Right.
right? Christian or not Christian?
Neither.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, the common narrative or the common
Right.
interpretation of the Bible,
Right.
right, is that Jesus
Right.
wasn't a fan of the rich.
Right.
Okay. I'm not saying that's the right interpretation.
Right. That's what I mean.
But that's the common interpretation.
Right.
Okay, so you're uncommon among Christians in that way. If you don't, I have no dog in this fight at all.
Right.
I don't care.
Right. I just think
But-
it's a misreading of Scripture. I do that, and the principle isn't rich or not rich. It's ethic. It's
So
how you.
Where do I sign up to be a Christian? Can we do this right now?
Go talk to that guy.
Can you just anoint me right now and I can join the church? No.
So that's what I mean. That's not
fascinating.
Christian. It's not the Christian thing to say you shouldn't be rich.
Yeah. So there's a long, long tradition of progressives and socialists who have even cited Scripture.
I know.
Right?
I know.
And have said, well, the rich should give up their money so that the poor can be no longer poor, because that's what Jesus said. And actually, in my reading, that's how I read the Bible. I think the Bible actually comports with their interpretation of it. Again, they're not right, but that when I read the Bible for the first time in college, that's what I saw. I was a socialist then. I was like, oh, this is my boy, Jesus, right here. Yeah, he's a
Right.
socialist. Totally. But I don't care if you read it differently, and I
Right.
don't think you're wrong.
It's just that it would be harder to live according to some principles with a lot of money. It's harder if you have a lot, but there's I mean,
Did you support Trump?
I just didn't support Hillary.
What do you think of Trump?
Oh, he's funny.
Wait, no. Give the mic to your daughter. What do you think of Trump?
Better than Hillary.
Uh-huh. Pretend your mom's not here. Just pretend. Let's take a second here. Just do the mental exercise. Mom's gone. Mom's gone. She left. She's going shopping now. She's at the grocery store. She's not going to be home for at least an hour. You know that for sure. You're in your bedroom, doors closed. Now tell me, what do you think of Trump?
He's got ups and downsides, and that he's.
You're saying he's a complicated person.
Aren't we all?
Indeed. What's the ups? What are the ups?
That he's willing to do what.
Stop licking your mom. Do you want me to put something between you?
He's willing to do what some people don't want, and he's willing to disrupt, and I think that's definitely what we needed this time.
Not bad.
Willing to disrupt.
And that's what we need at this time.
That's a pretty good answer.
Again, so I would not only like to join your church, I'd like to join your family. Can I be your son or something? Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. Still looking for something I don't like here. And you know me, I love to fight, so it's not like I'm being nice, right? I'm not nice to people, you know. I don't do that just to be nice. Wait, I'm not done with Olivia. Hold on. We did the ups. Now what are the downs?
He's not the most rational person in the world.
What's wrong with that? We covered this weekend, Olivia. Were you not paying attention? Was she taking notes? She was taking notes, as a matter of fact. Most amazing experience of my whole life. A 14-year-old girl I've never met before taking notes about what I'm saying. That's incredible. That's the greatest moment of my whole life. Pretty much. It's one of them, top 10.
He just not.
He's not rational. I agree.
No.
Not always, yeah.
And that's not necessarily the worst thing, even, because as I said, we needed a disruptor.
Mm-hmm. But okay, keep going. You're on to something good. Finish the thought. Well, but there's a downside to not being rational, right? Yeah. Especially if you're president.
Irrational decisions?
Or especially not if you are president, but if he is president, right? There's a downside to him being irrational, right? Which is, what do you think? Can you think of anything?
He makes irrational decisions sometimes.
Okay, yeah.
What's an example of that? Is that all right? A fair question? What was something that you heard about him doing and you were like, oh my God, an adult did that or said that? Said is that's definitely a way to steer it.
I know what you're talking about. I don't know.
That's all right.
What does your dad think about you being here right now? Does he know about me?
Yes.
He has a general sense of what's going on here. Okay, and what does he think?
The same as my mom does.
Just whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Does he have I take it he has sort of the same general attitude about things as you do? Yeah.
In general, sure.
What do you differ about?
Less now than when we first met. I was far more liberal when we first met than I am now.
Politically?
Politically.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You mean more Christian?
No.
Just kidding. Mostly.
God, what do we deliver? I don't know what we differ on. Yeah, that I use bad words and he doesn't.
Oh, really? Oh, good. So the F-bombs were fine.
Yeah.
For me. I was really worried about that. Because I forgot you were there for a minute, a couple times. And I was like, oops, what did I just do?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. Let's keep working. Oh, military. Okay.
Okay.
All right. We might have some problems here. So tell me, what's the deal?
With the military?
No, like with me about the military.
Well, you really don't like them. So maybe I think maybe I've worked out that what your problem is with the people who get to tell the military what to do and less with the people who do the doing.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I worked that out this weekend.
Oh, yeah. No, so you worked that out, but I worked something out too.
Okay.
which is I worked that out fairly recently in the same way I worked this out about cops.
Right.
So I don't know if you heard me say this, but I 2 or 3 years ago, like when all the videos of the police shootings came out, like I was one of those people that was like, kill the cops. Like,
I
said that
remember
publicly. Yeah. And like I really wanted to kill cops.
Yeah.
I'm a little embarrassed about that now, partly because it's kind of just juvenile, but mostly actually because it proceeded from a very bad analysis of what was going on. I mean, that's a different story. But anyway, but yes, with the military, first of all, if you're born and raised in Berkeley, like you just have to dislike military people. It started to change when I was a professor, actually, because I did have several students who were in the military or were veterans. And since then, especially since I've been living in Oregon, lots of vets in Salem, where I live. Not Portland, but Salem. Like that's the real deal, right? And also, oh, by the way, like a lot. Oh my God, I forgot this part. A lot of people who like my book and like my work, and people known as fans. I hate using that word, but whatever. A lot of veterans.
Absolutely.
Have been into it, which has always been surprising to me. In fact, we have an active member of the Army here this weekend, right? Blows me away. But man, I don't have any problem with them at all. I never have. And oh yeah, it's the policymakers. And here's another reason that changed my mind. Well, you got to look at why they're in Vietnam, why they're in Iraq, why they're in Japan, why they're in these places. They didn't make those decisions. As a matter of fact, what really turned me was when I started to study the history of these things and the decision-making that went into them, all those wars. Mm-hmm. As I said to you guys this weekend, right? Every single one of those things came from the minds of professors, eggheads at Harvard and Yale and Columbia, not from the military people, and most certainly not from the rank and file, the actual soldiers, the enlisted people, But
those people are always pushed out in front of the agenda
sure, it makes
that
it
he's
easier.
talking about, of course, to say, like, look what you're criticizing.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And then I think
yeah.
the approach that sometimes it's laziness and sometimes it's just frustration. Because what's the technique there to get people to go, oh, no, sorry, support the troops, whatever. I mean, it is a way of silencing dissent about the military decisions that he's actually criticizing. So those people actually put soldiers in more of harm's way, not just physical harm's way,
right?
But like, they're the targets because nobody even understands. I think the extent that how the decision making goes up, and like who's
Correct.
really responsible.
Correct. But it's also more complicated because despite why these soldiers are in the places they are, they encounter, and maybe here's where we disagree, I don't know, evil that my husband would tell me about soldiers that are encountering the kind of evil that if you were encountering it, you'd shoot too. Mm-hmm. And so it's just more complicated than, oh, we were there for oil or, oh, we're there for geopolitical influence. Yeah. But once you're there, they're doing things to fight evil.
I mean, I don't use the term or category evil.
Right.
But if I were in...
But like child rape and murdering women.
If I were in the same room as ISIS or Al-Qaeda or the Nazis.
Right.
Or even, the Japanese army in the 1940s.
Right.
Evil or not, very, very, very nasty people for sure.
Right.
And if I had a gun with me, I would most likely use it.
Right.
As I would today, as a matter of fact. So, no, again...
So no disagreement.
We're fine, I think, so
Awesome.
far. Well, let me ask you this, though.
Yes.
Let me push a little harder, though.
Go ahead.
So I have described the, the culture. Let's see, what is it? The culture, or trying to put this in a way that's not provocative needlessly, but the cultural expectation that we treat veterans and members of the military with a special reverence or respect. In other words, that we not criticize them, and that more than that, we sort of treat them differently than just as individuals or human beings, right? They have sort of special status in our society, right? What do you think of that?
I would say the not criticize them is important because generally the criticism isn't shouldn't be directed at them. It ought to be directed at the policy people and the ones who come up with the plan. So I say, don't criticize unless you have specific criticisms, right?
Totally agree.
I think we need our military because we're a country. What we do with them is a different story. So I think we need people who are willing to join and to serve, and that we should be grateful that there's people that want to do that, because most of us don't want to do that. And so thanks and acknowledgement in that sense would be appropriate. The same way, I'm not going to say that one.
Wait. Say it in a different way.
I know.
Whatever it was.
We generally in society thank people for doing things we don't want to do ourselves.
Sure.
And there's many different categories. There's always a big push to thank teachers, right? Whether we think we should be thanking them or being mad at them, that's a different story. Okay. But, or thank your police or thank your fire. I'm trying to think of who's not political to thank. Somebody who does a job that's...
Truckers.
Thank the truckers.
Crossing guards. Yeah. So I think it's gratitude is never a bad thing. So yeah, be grateful to those who do the job you don't want to do so you can do the job that you do want to do. And okay. All right.
But Veterans Day yesterday, my husband said, do not, Friday, I've lost track.
Yeah, you don't even know when
I don't.
Day
well, the only thing he said, do not do that obligatory acknowledging of me on Facebook.
Wow.
Because he doesn't.
Yeah. That's most veterans I've known are like
right.
that. Yeah, that's
so.
All right, this is my last chance. This is my last try. Okay, I'm gonna do my best here. Do you think that the U.S. military has been used in ways in recent history, like in your lifetime, that make you and me and us less safe? Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
I'm not talking about attacking Americans. I'm talking about attacking other people in the rest of the world needlessly in ways that provoke them to want to do harm to us. I'm saying that's a position, right, that's been taken.
It is.
Do you agree with that at all or not?
I can see the argument for it, and I think it's a reasonable reading of it.
Okay.
But I also think that there's that alternate universe where had we not done something, maybe we're open to more this, that, or the other.
Okay.
So I think that there's lots of different ways you can look at it. Sure, absolutely. We do stuff and somebody gets mad and does something back.
Okay.
But there's also, if we don't do things, somebody gets mad and I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it can be a yes or no answer.
Right.
Yes and no.
So the only veterans I get angry at, I guess, and I refuse to thank, are the ones who volunteer for specific missions that I think actually make me and you and Olivia less safe, right? Like, for instance, I don't know, volunteering for, to be a Navy SEAL in order to go kill some Taliban in Afghanistan who have no interest in attacking us until this happens, right? Or let's say if someone who volunteers to be a drone operator, dropping bombs that also kill children in Iraq and Syria and Yemen, and causes their parents to hate me just because I'm an American, and makes it more likely for them to do something to us, right? So the people who volunteer specifically for those missions, I'm not talking about the 18-year-old kid who's just like, I want to serve my country and I watch video games and it looks cool to shoot people, blah, blah, blah. I don't love that, but I'm not mad at them. But I am kind of mad at the people who are grown men and women who choose to do specifically things that I think make it less safe for me.
And I think, on the other side of the argument, too, is that there's an ideology here that encourages this kind of behavior regardless of U.S. or British intervention. But there's also, what we're seeing now, until 2 years ago, I thought every argument about foreign policy and who we're fighting in the Middle East was absolutely fabricated bullshit. Right?
Sure.
And then I've seen things in the last couple of years with the migration crisis and some of the things that have happened in Great Britain and in the United States
Right.
that have at least made me say, okay, well, this is not, it's not like they just copied the plot of the Roadrunner cartoon to make up Al Qaeda, right? Like this lives in caves and hates our free and capricious lifestyle,
Right.
so plots against us with bombs and pianos to drop on us, right? Which was basically the story we got post 9/11 in the United States.
Right.
So we acknowledge that this problem is real, but just to add some detail to what he's saying, as far as the ideology or the extreme of that ideology and the evil that you mentioned that it creates or justifies in that part of the world. But what has happened with the U.S. military in Iraq and in Afghanistan, the chaos and the displacement and the pollution, the damage, the destruction has led to a displacement of people that now has made us aware of some of the darker aspects of the Muslim world, right?
Sure.
So the impact of U.S. foreign policy is real. It's in the news every day in Europe, Germany, Sweden, the UK, the United States.
No, I'm not talking about it.
But
I'm not talking about their effects on other people. Just leave it to what their effects I believe are on me.
Right.
Me, making me less safe. Why should I thank someone who I believe has volunteered to make me less safe? Now, so what you can do is either say, I'm wrong in my analysis, they're not making me less safe, right? And then that's just
Right.
sort of an empirical question,
Sure.
right? But, well, yeah, what do you think?
Well, and a fortune-telling question, because the only way to know that they're not making you less safe would to be a fortune teller.
Well, it's not that they're doing
Right.
it either. It's that the policies that they're carrying out, and when people attack or don't support the troops, or it's like the same approach people take with the police. People say the police are people who have consciences and can make decisions about what kind of orders to follow. So if they're the tip of the spear, those are the people that you have to target, and those are the people that you have to call out because they are, no, I'm just saying this is
Sure.
Okay. So the policymakers, of course, deserve most of the credit,
but they're
or the
never
blame.
going. You can't access them.
But without
Right.
volunteers, right?
Right.
There is no Navy SEAL team. There are no drone operators. And in fact, most of the killing that's actually done nowadays is done by a very few people who are
Correct.
one or the other, right?
Correct.
It's the drone operators or the special ops people. So those are volunteers, and all that stuff relies on people volunteering, and I'm not happy with those people who volunteered. Is that okay?
But, well, it's fair. Sure. That's fair.
Okay.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I've known a lot of those people
Yeah, I bet.
on personal levels. The very men that you would say, oh, he volunteered to do this, the tip of the spear people.
Yeah.
I don't know if they are in essence what you think them to be. So maybe it's just their choice that you don't.
You know what I don't think they are? Evil.
Right. Okay.
I do
So
not
there you
think
go.
they're evil.
Right. I think.
I also don't think they're bad people.
Right.
I think they made a very deliberate, conscious choice that endangered me. So I don't know. It's to me, it's sort of similar to what I would think about the kid who threw the rock off of the top of the building, right, onto a street. He thought it was cool and fun, but it actually made me less safe, right? So
Sure, but it's not like they joined because they thought it was cool and fun. They join
Well, I don't
and
know.
they.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay,
actually.
well,
I think
in
that's part of it,
general,
but anyway,
but
yeah.
most of them believe that what they're doing will make you or their loved ones or whoever safer.
Correct.
Okay, so do you think
That's true.
they join as the result of a well-reasoned argument, or do you think they join as the result often? I mean, this is a generalization, but as the result of an emotional argument, right? Because like
I think
for
they
Vietnam,
join for way more reasons than that. I think there's.
What do you think of the people that you knew? If you could make some generalizations about why they joined, what would they be?
Honestly, I have seen the gamut. You have people who join that believe that it's the best use of their life to protect a country or a people they love. I have seen people who have joined because it is the only option they have not to fall to the bottom of society and have no path to earning a living. I've seen people join because they thought it was the place they could do the most good. I've seen people who have joined because they need that structure.
And the only one of those, I would say, is a practical and not an emotional argument. And I think one of the things that the deeper seated things that upset people about this is that the people that he's criticizing sit in rooms with maps and plans and counts of troops and tanks and guns, and then the people that you come face to face with in the world are used as a kind of puppet show to make an emotional argument,
absolutely,
to get people to support what the people in the behind the rooms. When people say we, and they're talking about the military and the decisions the military make, they're saying we to describe a group of people that they've never heard of behind the closed doors of a room they're not in, right?
Absolutely.
Drawing up military plans.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of anger that people in this issue of the troops and the military and U.S. foreign policy that people just, I think by design, don't know how to direct in a constructive way.
Absolutely right.
And
I think that
but I just think
we're having problems, Marcy.
Yeah. Right. It's just so complicated in one sense because there's people who are employed by the military who think exactly like you do. I have a very dear friend.
Yeah, we know.
Who
we know a lot of them.
Right. Who I joined up because I was going to save the world. Yep. And now I have to live with what I've done. Yep. And people who had the same career and did the same things who I joined up and I'm proud of what I've done. And they're responding in different ways to the same set of facts.
Yeah. That first group sounds like they might also like teaching.
I don't know. It's hard. I don't have an answer for you. Sorry.
No, I think we did it.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we're fine now. I'm looking forward to my new life. What's my last name now?
We don't give out new
last name?
We don't.
Oh, wow.
But we do all the other stuff really well.
Yeah. I can tell.
We do. We have
you.
no mind, body. That's like the heart of it.
I love it. I'm speechless. It's phenomenal. Thank you for coming. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much
for doing this. Thanks for
Mostly
letting this not appropriate space be okay for a mom and her kid.
Awesome. Thanks.
If you want to support this show, there are two ways to do it. You can make a simple donation by going to thaddeusrussell.com/podcast, or you can become a supporting listener of the show and a member of the Unregistered community by going to unregisteredunderground.com. When you become a supporting listener, you'll become a member of a private Facebook group where every single day we talk and argue about the issues and ideas from the episodes of the show. You'll also get discounts on Renegade University videos and courses, including the upcoming webinar on postmodernism, and on our new unregistered merchandise. Again, to become a supporting member of the Unregistered community, please go to unregisteredunderground.com. This was the Unregistered Podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell.